Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the 5th of October today. So, welcome. Please help yourself to cake, because I think we do have something to celebrate, but we'll deal with that later. Apologies, we have from Stephanie at Democratic Service, we've got Councillor Satinder, who is not here, and Nina is en route, and she's going to be subbing Nina the Mayor. And we've got Michael Pearce, he's not here, but we've got George as a substitute. I'm using first names, colleagues, because our ambition is to make our committee child-friendly, and I've got the worst name for everyone of all, so I'm just Jo. If you think I'm naughty, you can call me Joanne, but it's Jo, please. And we've also had apologies from Victoria, the teacher representative. So I'm looking at records of the last minute, item 2 on the agenda, records of the last meeting. Any changes on page 1 that anyone's noticed? No? Any matters anyone wants to raise? No? Okay, I will assign those as correct and date those, and then we're swiftly on to item 3, which is urgent matters, of which there are none. So, whipping and pecuniary interests. Anyone like to declare anything? No? Okay, then I'm going to hand over, and I want to say a really big thank you, because I know you've come in at thelastminute.com. Can I send our best wishes to Donna, who is fabulous but unwell at the moment, and so she's got her A team who are going to present item 5. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jo. The first item, of course, is around children's social care and the results of the ILAC inspection. So I'll just quickly go over some of that for you, and then I'll pass over to the others. So most of you will have heard the news now, by now, that Medway Council's children's social care is no longer inadequate. Of course, it was inadequate found inadequate 2019. It's been 4 years of an improvement journey, and I must pay credit, if I'm able to, Jo, to Councillor Josie Isles, as she was then, the lead member for children, who was absolutely fantastic in guiding and leading through that improvement journey, including scrutiny under the previous election cycle. So well done to everyone. I think I'll just move straight into the judgment areas for you. So Ofsted, there's 4 areas that they inspect.
Sorry, that was the guillotine of my walking aid. I apologise.
No, it's all right.
I was trying to get out of the way of the screen.
The experiences and progress of children who need help and protection was found to be requires improvement to be good. But the experiences and progress of children in care was found to be good, as was the experiences and progress of care leavers. So our care leavers were found to be good. And of course, the impact of leaders on social work practice with children and families was found to be good. So that is a great testament to all of the staff in children's services, whether they're at our early help workers, our family support workers, our social workers, our youth workers. Everyone in children's services played a really, really big part to getting us to good. So just briefly, because I know that you would have read the report yourselves, Ofsted reported that our services for children and families had substantially improved, and to go from inadequate through to good is something to be proud of. So I think we can all be proud of that. most pleasing to me, they reported that most families received the right support at the earliest opportunities and their situations improve. And of course, that's what we're all about. That's our statutory responsibility. They also found that the work in terms of assessments were detailed with clear evaluation of strengths and risks leading to appropriate recommendations for next steps of families. And for those of you who have been on this improvement journey, you'll know that that was one of the sticking points for quite some time. So that was good. And of course, children regularly seen by social workers. So going on to children in care, I'm pleased that they saw that the majority of children live in stable homes, and our commissioning colleagues have to be thanked for that. Not only our provider services with our foster families, but also our commissioning colleagues who find appropriate accommodation for our children. They also reported that children's health and education needs were well met, and I'd like to pay credit to our health partners because they too put in a lot of effort. We do have a small number of children in unregistered children's homes. That is a national issue. Capacity is not as it should be, and you'll hear a bit more about that as we go along. And our foster carers, our great foster carers, felt well supported, so that was music to my ears as well. Leaving care, our personal advisors to our children who are care leavers are strong advocates for our young people. Great. The Care Leavers Hub, if you haven't had a chance to visit that yet, I would recommend it, was found to be safe and welcoming, and I think that is a really good advancement on 2019. Our care leavers now have somewhere to call their own. And people like Sophie and others who have really pushed us along and challenged us around that. So thanks to you too, Sophie. I'm not going to go through all of this because it's straightforward. I do want to touch on leadership though, because corporate and political leaders have addressed the systemic weaknesses and are now a strong, determined and cohesive leadership team. And that was something that I feel particularly proud of, that we've been able to galvanise our corporate colleagues, our enabling services, finance, legal, HR, all to work for the betterment of children. And of course, you, our political arm, I must thank you for your work that you've done also. Ofsted gave us a lovely strapline, and you'll see it out there now, Children Matter in Medway. I couldn't have asked for a better strapline, punchy, clear and true. So that was really good. They absolutely appreciated. I think when they came into Medway, I think they felt relatively confident because they'd been in with monitoring visits, etc. But when they were able to actually spend 2 weeks looking at work, speaking to social workers, meeting young people, I absolutely think that they were, I want to use the word blown away, because I absolutely think that they saw something significant, and you'll get that, significant improvements. We've got some issues. Am I handing over to somebody now around workforce, or am I still doing it? I'm still doing it. Ingrid, you're doing it. Sorry.
No, I think this one you're still doing,
Yeah.
Leanne. I'm just going to do the sufficiency bit.
Okay. All right. Workforce, still an issue. You'll hear about that tonight. Labour shortages around social workers and some aspects of the children's services workforce. We have met those significant challenges as robustly and as innovatively as we can, but we're not there yet. having a change of social worker for children regularly is not something that you would want. Our interim workforce, does a great job, but by nature of the word interim, they do move on, and that's when the quality actually gets damaged, not only in terms of the relationship with the young person, but in terms of quality assessments and all the work that goes around it. Okay, so the journey's not done yet. I think that's, we have ambitions. I think everyone sitting around this table has an ambition to do better. I know the leader of Medway Council has said publicly that he wishes children's services to progress on to outstanding, and there were several areas there that Ofsted challenged us to look at, the quality and impact of social work practice, particularly our work with adolescents. That's an area we really do need to focus on, and we are. The quality and effectiveness of assessments, plans, intervention and responses for children at risk of exploitation, that links with the adolescent agenda a little bit, but we were challenged around that. The quality of our direct work, so the direct working with children and young people. Ofsted saw some good examples of that, but not consistently across the service. And the quality and consistency of assessments and planning to support our disabled children, that is very, very important, and we've done a lot of work on that, and we will continue to do so. And of course, the quality and consistency of management oversight, because if you get consistent management, you often get a better quality and consistency. If you have a constant change of team managers, for example, then it's not easy to keep that consistency. So next steps, I'm not going to go through every single one because I know you will have read this yourself, but we do need to continue to focus on maintaining that consistency and quality of practice. We do need to keep developing that partnership approach with contextual safeguarding and serious youth violence. Improving our response to young people, mainly 16, 17-year-olds who are at risk of being homeless. Mental health, a big issue. We really need to be working with partners around that. Supporting the workforce, as I've said, and that sits with sufficiency, capacity, retention, all of those issues that you need to be dealing with. And last but not least, the voice of the children, young people and their families in Medway, really, really important that we listen to that, we respond to that, and we work with our children. And the final slide there, that was Ofsted's catchphrase, children matter in Medway. So we'll keep going, Joe, and then take questions later. So over to the next. Please, sufficiency.
Thank you, Leanne. So this year, Children's Services have prepared the sufficiency response. It's called The Place to Call Home, and I'm going to talk you through. It has 4 components. We are looking at supporting families so the children can safely remain home, and we offer the right help at the right time. When children come into our care, we want to have enough homes for them here locally. We want to make sure that we promote stability, so children, you will have seen also the government national agenda, stable homes built on love, and we want to make sure that our caregivers have suitable places to live. Some of the slides are going to be very busy and others are going to be quite dense, so I'll try to talk you through it. This is the projection of the numbers of children that have come into care in the last 3 years, and you will see that there is an upward trajectory there. In this context, we have also seen a shrinkage of our in-home provision in terms of Medway foster carers, and then consequently we had to use more foster carers that operate in the independent fostering agencies. And there are some information there about the costs and how costs have increased due to the cost of living crisis and so on and so forth. This slide talks about the number of children who live in children's homes, and you will see there it says not including schools. So this is children in care. This is not children with additional needs or disabilities who are in specialist school provisions. And the PNC reference is parent and children who need to be in a specialist provision to be assessed. So we exclude that and we just count children that are in our care. And you will see the numbers fluctuate a little bit, but we tend to stay around the 40 ballpark figure. In terms of the challenges, as the couple of slides earlier were showing, we see that more children come into our care. We see larger siblings groups coming into our care, and the fact that when they come into our care, children tend to be significantly more impacted by the harm and the abuse that they suffered. They have significantly more complex needs and presentations, and we are trying to find ways to address those complex needs. There are also nationally challenges throughout the sector, and it's not just about social worker, it's also about residential children's workers, it's also about family support workers, PAs, so the staffing issues permeate all jobs in the sector. For a while, Medway Children's Services did not take unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and we've started to do that. And consequently, we will expect the number of children in care to increase as we take over our quota. And then, similar to our neighboring local authority, from the number of provision available in Medway, we tend to use a fairly limited amount, and other local authorities, we believe, placed about 400 of children in Medway. And that puts a lot of pressure, not just on the availability of homes and foster placements, but also on hospital waiting lists or school admissions or so on and so forth. So there are ripple effects throughout the sector. And I think I've spoke about this at the corporate parenting and in other forums. Recruiting internal foster carers is a challenge. Again, we know about the cost of living crisis and how that impacts on people. And again, the fact that even people who foster in Medway, they're being used by other local authorities, so the pool that we have available for our children is quite small. I'm not going to read everything because you've had the pack and you would have read it and you're familiar with this. But under each one of those four pillars, there is information about the things that we've done, the services we developed to address those challenges that I've spoken about. And in terms of supporting families, for example, colleagues in commissioning have worked tirelessly in making sure we have sufficient services that can wrap around. So we offer the right help at the right time. We try to prevent escalation of needs into more complex level of intervention so children can remain safely at home. And we've done some of that ourselves. I'm extremely proud for having led and leading the multidisciplinary service and of the help and the support that they offer, again, trying to prevent children coming into care and enabling them to stay at home. In terms of a place to call home, we are continuing to develop our offer, and we have worked, and again, colleagues in commissioning have worked tirelessly on making sure that recruitment for Eden House has progressed. And now that we've managed to appoint the registered manager, we are progressing the Ofsted registration. We are also continuously exploring the services that we can offer to children with disabilities. So we're looking at refurbishing Old Even, and then bringing in other provisions to wrap around and make sure that the children who are in our care have the help and support that they need here locally in Medway. In terms of stability, there's a lot of work that's being done, so those children who are in our care can remain with our foster carers, that we help foster carers and they feel supported to hold on and be able to parent sometimes children with very, very complex needs. And again, just like ourselves, colleagues across in health services and mental health services face the same struggles to respond to these very significant levels of complexity. And a lot of work is being done to try to make sure that we have those services here in place so that children don't sit on waiting lists for long periods of time. In terms of moving forward, there is the Care Leavers Housing Project. There are new processes in place to help young people so that it doesn't spring on us that they've just turned 18 and then they haven't got the right place to live, that we start to think about this early, we start to prepare young people so they are ready to step into the independence and make use of the provision that's already available to them. And the family partnership team sits in the multidisciplinary service in providers with me, and we do a lot of work to help mums and dads who repeatedly find themselves in difficult situations and lose children from their care, to be able to bring some stability to their lives and to try to address some of those risks. So we don't see mums and dads having to lose 7, 8 children from their care. In terms of the next steps, we are continuing to work with providers so that when we call them and say we have a little boy or a little girl who needs a home, that they are open and listening and working with us. I've already talked about Eden House and Oateven, and there are a number of national work strands that you might have seen and are familiar with stemming from stable homes built on love. There is a lot of work being done around fostering, and Medway is part of a southeast region, and we secured additional funding from the Department of Education to set up a regional recruitment hub for foster carers and to develop Mockingbird in Medway to be able to support our current foster carers to hold on to those children that sometimes have very significant needs. And again, I'll leave you to read all of those that detail for yourself, and I'll pause here and pass on to Becky. Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I get the straw to talk about recruitment and our workforce update. And hopefully you've had time to look at some of these figures. And what I hope to do is just put a bit of explanation behind some of the data. I think what I want to start on the outset is to say that the DfE workforce returns have yet to be published for 2023, and the closing date for that was the 30th of September. So this information is based on published data up until 2022, and indicators that we have locally from the southeast, but also through the various forums that Leanne as the director and others sit on nationally to understand what the workforce picture is. And I think what you will have noticed as you just work through some of these slides, that although Medway has historically had a greater vacancy rate, or we're on the higher side of vacancy rates for permanent social workers, you'll see that some of our statistical neighbours and other neighbouring local authorities are actually catching up with us, and we're actually falling a bit more in line with the national picture across vacancies. So the first slide is specifically looking at recruitment, and you can see, that you can see here that the number of children's social workers directly employed by Medway at the point of publication was 187. And this actually is an increase of 61 permanent social workers since 2019. And one of the things that we wanted to demonstrate through these slides is that has increased as time has gone on. So you will see the trajectories going up around our permanent employment, and that's important to us. We very much are aware that we have our vacancies covered by agency staff and also currently by project and bank teams. And I know that that's something that the administration is keen to know about, what our plans are going forward. And we know that there are end dates early next year for those particular teams to finish. But of course, what's important to us is the permanent workforce for social workers working with children and families. And so you'll see towards the end of our slide pack that there is a lot of intention and planned activity to continue with the ongoing recruitment. And we've got a number of strategies that we were working on before Ofsted and certainly have carried on working and driving forward post Ofsted. But just looking at the vacancy rates, you'll see that Medway back in 2019, and this is permanent vacancy rates, were sitting at 20.4. And then we hiked quite quickly in 2020 up to 29%. When you look at the percentage of vacancies in 2022, we were still sitting at 29% and thereabouts, and that's where you'll begin to see other local authorities catching up with us. So whilst our reputation may have been damaged by the 2019 inspection, we're confident that we've managed to maintain that vacancy rate with an increase of permanent appointments. And so again, looking at the trajectory and looking at where others sit around the South East, we are hopeful to be able to build on the good reputation of Medway. Which really leads me into the final two slides, which are looking at our planned activity. And this is very much where I want us to focus our thinking this evening. We have 9 newly qualified social workers that have joined us just this month, and we're really excited to welcome them, with a further 2 joining us in March, and that's due to maternity leave, so they're coming slightly later. But we have every intention to renew that sort of cohort 2, as we call it, for April, and we hope to be able to build on the master's programme and the intake of social workers through that programme. But what we are pleased to tell you is that out of those 9 that started in September, 5 of those are our step-up students and our apprentices, which is a real good news story for Medway, because that demonstrates that our grow your own plans, if you like, for growing social workers within Medway through a variety of different means is really beginning to take off. And so we feel confident that based on that information that we will see that grow over the years to come. This morning, all of my colleagues, heads of service colleagues, along with colleagues from HR, met with all of, well, as many that could make it, agencies that provide us with workers for a HR agency discussion breakfast. We had agencies travelling from Manchester, from Ipswich, from Colchester. We're not quite sure how they did it because there was a train strike, but they saw it as important that they would join us this morning. I think we had about 30, was my guess, of agencies and representation, and really wanted to engage on a personal level with agencies. And agency feedback today was that that made a difference, that they now know who we are. And when they're trying to get candidates for us, they know who the heads of service are. They're confident in talking about the vacancies, where they might be, what the job profiles are, what kind of workers we're looking for, because we're very clear that we won't just take anyone in Medway. It's really not about getting bottoms on seats. It's about the quality of social workers that come and join us across a variety of appointments. And we won't be railroaded into just taking anyone whose CVs that come through the door. And we really were able to get that message across this morning, and I think that was taken very seriously. We have a number of temp to perm events that we're planning over the coming months, and that's something that Leanne has certainly driven in her time. And we also are looking at how we can approach our bank and project teams to look at whether or not they would be interested in becoming permanent workers in Medway, and if not, whether they would essentially, what it would mean was a reduced payment, but to come as agency workers for those permanent vacancies that we're still unable to fill. And we've already had a good response to that. So we've seen, I think, 3 or 4 agreeing to change their work arrangements through the agencies, and that's something that we're powering through to try and recruit from those project teams. And that's very much about wanting stability for our children and families. They're the main areas that I wanted to focus on today, so I'm happy to draw that to an end, and then we'll be welcome to take any questions.
Thank you so much, and I can't stop smiling now we're good, because obviously I know Liz and a few of us were on that journey, and it did take a lot of hard work. But I have to say, when I found out that your team didn't have leave from January, and you just worked like Trojan horses, I cannot believe how hard you worked. But I just want to thank you, because you did prove that our children matter and our young people matter too. So thank you all. So now it's the debate. Right, we'll go with George, please. P. Oh dear. Technology.
None of them are working, no.
Hello, there we go. Hope no one clips that up on the live stream. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Leanne, Ingrid, and colleagues. Really appreciate the comprehensive presentation, and as reflecting what Joe said, the work that you've undertaken over the past few months, particularly in guiding us through the ILACS inspection. And I know you all took some well-earned leave after that in August, so I was pleased to hear that too. Just to really reflect first on where we are, I think on behalf of the opposition, let me just say publicly here very clearly, we are exceptionally proud of our officers and all the teams from across the council and from our partners in working to ensure that Medway's Children's Services is now good. 2019 was unacceptable. The previous leader of our group and the previous administration made that very clear. And I'm really pleased that the Deputy Chief Executive reflected on the work of my friend and colleague, former Councillor Josie Arles, who I know took this really head on and worked night and day to deliver the changes needed to the service to get it into the position where it is now. With the support of Alan Jarrett, the leader, and with a cabinet that were dedicated to delivering that journey and putting the finance behind that to ensure that we were able to deliver on that improvement journey. And as I've said in the media, and I'll repeat here again tonight, that has been crucial in the delivery of this, and that's made clear both within the Ofsted report and in conversations certainly that I've had with other experts on this matter. I also just want to briefly reflect, indeed, as Joe references, on the work of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the previous chair, Barry Kemp, previous opposition spokesperson, Clive Johnson, and others, who really worked collectively in order to not only deliver the changes needed within ONS to support that journey, but also the work of our previous administration in delivering this good outcome that we're exceptionally proud of. And I think it really builds on the leadership that we've shown on children's services and education over the past 4 years and beyond, in terms of ensuring that our children and young people have the best start to life. Before I come on to questions, I just also wanted to reflect. Earlier this week, as colleagues are probably aware, we had certainly our Conservative Party conference, and there were a number of us in attendance. And on Monday, I attended a event with which was called by the Chief Executive of Barnardo's, with other lead members and shadow lead members from across the country. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the impact of that good judgment from a reputation perspective. We've got Kent next door that are outstanding. We're now good on that journey to outstanding. And really, the support that provides in driving these further improvements to the service. We've just been reflecting on ensuring we can recruit staff. That's a key part of that. You know, and the brand and the ethos that we've now got within the service is absolutely transformed on where it was from 2019. So I just think that, you know, we need to reflect on that within this. So that's my sort of opening comments. Just to come on really to some questions within the reports. Just firstly, it'd be interesting to know from officers just around the succession planning within senior roles within the council. I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that now that we've got this good outcome, you know, we've got some exceptional leaders within the service. What are we doing to ensure that we sort of build this for the long term? So building both within our sort of up and coming officers currently in sort of lower management roles, but also middle management to ensure that they're ready to progress into senior management, because I think that's going to be really important if we're going to maintain and sustain the outcome moving forward. Second point is just around how we're ensuring that we're building further resilience into the workforce. I know we've referenced agencies, obviously the work that the administration have committed to in terms of agency staff. I think it would be really useful just to sort of outline if there's going to be a plan around that, what we're sort of thinking in terms of how that might work, Obviously, I know there was some conversations we've had with the agency staff themselves about coming full-time to Medway, but it would be interesting to know if there's been any sort of plan as to how we might go about that. And then the third question for me is just around the improvement board and just how that's going to continue to operate, and some background about who will be sort of key players within that, because obviously during the period up until the ILACS inspection, that operated with some external people sort of overseeing as well, so it'd be helpful from that perspective. Yeah, so they're my questions at the moment. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments and questions. After any good Ofsted, there is always a natural moving on of staff, and I might be as bold to say that given the spectacular result that Medway had, senior leaders' currency will be actually quite high at the moment. So, you plan for that, and we wish, our leaders well in terms of career. We do everything we can, training, leadership training. We've been working on that as part of the improvement journey. So you would get some natural moving on. I'm absolutely confident we will have stability, absolutely confident. There is a plan around workforce. It is at the moment being updated, but the bones of it you've got tonight. That will be ongoing, and I'm sure Donna at a future ONS will be able to present that to you. But I'm not going to go into that too much now, but there's certainly a plan. The Improvement Board, now that we are good, we are not under the auspices of the DFE anymore. So with the agreement of the leader, Councillor Maple, and the lead member for children, Councillor Price, it's been agreed that that Improvement Board will stand down. I was in favour of that because there needs to be a line in the sand. We are no longer deficient. We are good. We need to send a different message. So there will be an improvement board. I will chair it 3 times a year. There will be partners on board, and we have been given an invitation by the DFE that if we ever need support, their officers will do their best, so we can call on that support should we wish. And we will bring in external people, probably subject specialists, as we need to around that board. And of course, our whole focus is on providing a good or better service for our children, young people and families of Medway. So their voice is going to be very important in that board. The nuts and bolts of how that's going to happen need to still be worked out, but certainly we're not giving away that improvement board function. I think that's it.
Do you want to reply?
No, just to say thank you very much, and also I think I reflect on the work of the DFE independent advisor, who I know has been key in supporting officers on that as well. So thank you, Joe.
I've got Robbie next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report, and congratulations on your good thing. I have 3 questions about 3 different areas. The first one is about agency staff. So traditionally, with my mum being a foster carer for 13 years, agency staff would get paid more, but they would have more difficult cases. But some people would opt to work for local authority because they would have more placements available, but they would be paid slightly less. Local authorities then increased their salaries to match that paid by agencies, and then you saw a flux. So I'm interested, first of all, in where we are in terms of the pay difference between what local authorities, including Medway, are offering versus the current going rate in agencies. And my main question with regard to agency social workers is that in the report it said that across the South East the use of agency staff from local authorities varies from a lot all the way down to 0. So obviously it's a national challenge, but why is there that big variety, that range all the way down to 0 across the South East? And what are we learning from our neighbours in Kent who have the current rating of outstanding, or appreciate, that it's not as fresh as our good rating? Second question is about the asylum seeker children. I read that there are 19 currently here and more coming due to a national scheme. My question is, what impact does this have on our ability to provide for Medway children, and what provision are we getting from government, or what further provisions do we need to get from national government to ensure that provision for asylum seekers doesn't detrimentally impact our ability to provide for Medway-based children? And my third question is, the Ofsted report states that the experience of disabled kids is, quote, inconsistent. I just wondered why that is the case. Has that been picked up, and what your plans are to ensure that obviously disabled children have a consistently good experience as non-disabled children does, as described in the Ofsted report? Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie.
So I'll take the first question, which was around agency workers. It would be wrong for me to name a price right now in this meeting, but what I can say is we are part of a memorandum, and so the agency costings are exactly the same for all the agencies that sit within our memorandum. It's called the DPS. So we're held to account by what we pay in agreement across the South East with all of those agency workers. There is a difference, but what you get if you're a permanent worker in Medway for many, many staff outweighs being an agency worker. And so that is an area that we're building on, advertising the benefits of being in a permanent workforce, all of the things that Medway offer, and we have a good package, a good staff package in Medway, and that's something that we're really wanting to promote. That, along with our workforce development offer, our career progression, and all of the training opportunities that if you come to Medway as a permanent worker, you have available to you. So I hope that answers that question. The next question was around what are we learning from other local authorities such as Kent. I think it's fair to say that there are a number of outstanding local authorities in and around Medway, and we continue to learn from each other. And there are things that we do in Medway that are very positively received by Kent, and vice versa. In terms of the agency rates, Kent is a much, much bigger local authority, and living in Kent, you'll understand that once you get to a certain place in Kent, there's not really very further that you can go. And so you get a lot of people that live in Kent and stay in Kent because they don't cross the water and they don't want to travel that far back into London. I used to work in Kent, so I know the kind of makeup of staff for KCC. It's very different in Medway because it's got much more transient population, and we're able to, workers can go into Kent, out of Medway and into London much more quickly. So I think that does affect the possibility of our staffing, and that's something we're working towards.
If I can also come in on this point, again, if you've seen the national reform, you will have seen that the DfE is trying really, really hard to work with the sector and come up with a solution that offers the same terms and conditions to permanent worker and locum workers. And they have been consulting widely, and Association of Directors of Children's Services has been advocating and lobbying DfE to bring in these rules. We think they're going to come either at the end of this year or in the spring, so we will see that difference in pay and conditions really shrinking, and it's going to be driven nationally, so we're not going to compete with each other.
Unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, we currently have 26 as of today, out of a possible 63, which is our quota under the National Transfer Scheme. You'll know that Medway was late coming to the National Transfer Scheme, so an additional 26 children in our care will put pressure on facilities, but I can say that I'm absolutely pleased with the commitment of our partners to help us care for those 26 who have come into Medway. It's an issue. I'm not going to rehearse it because I know that nationally this is really well played out, but it is certainly a pressure. It is certainly something that we need to manage. but we are still some way off our 63 under the National Transfer Scheme. So every week we are taking 2 or 3 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children into our care. Disabled children, one of my colleagues can answer that.
So for Disabled Children's Services, our colleague who runs that service isn't here this evening, but we do have an action plan that we're working to within the Disabled Children's Service. We started on that before Ofsted, and although that's not where we wanted it to be, come the inspectors did actually note the improvements that had already been made within that service, with a relatively new service manager to that area who had made significant impact in a very short amount of time and who is with us permanently as part of our permanent workforce. So again, going forward, we're confident that that action plan is moving forward, and that's regularly monitored not only by the head of service but also part of the wider Children's Services management team and indeed Leanne's own management team as well.
And just to add there, in respect of that team, they've recruited 2 all-permanent staff as of this week, so that's really positive. We'll give that team and children in that team stability.
That's very welcome with regard to the disabled team. On the agency workers, thank you for your answers. Just one point I don't think was fully answered is why in the South East does the utility vary from 0% all the way up to high levels? Is it purely because Medway is well connected to London and it's a small local authority, so the geography answer? Is that the only reason why, or is there something else we can look at? And on the asylum children, is the provision for them provided for by national funding, or does Medway have to sort of front up money in order to pay for asylum children? Or is that all? I know nationally they're placed here, but does the funding come nationally, or is it a financial strain that you guys have to increasingly factor in? And if it is, what are we doing to ask government for that extra money? Thank you.
I'll answer that question. There is funding attached to every unaccompanied asylum-seeking child that comes into Medway. Whether that is enough to meet need, I couldn't comment on that at the moment because I've said that we're new to it, but at the moment we're certainly getting funding. The issue becomes more complicated when those children turn into care leavers because Medway Council is still responsible. Funding around care leavers is not the same. So yes, there is national funding, and I reserve the right really to at the moment about how that's going to play out. I know that some other colleagues in the South East would argue, DCS colleagues, that the funding is not sufficient. I can't give you a view on that yet, but maybe later.
And then if I respond to the locum and agency, so some of it is to do with geography, I think, and the fact that we are more vulnerable because we're closer to London as other places. But equally, we are trying to learn from our colleagues and trying to see what it is that they're doing, that we are not doing. We are regularly checking in with the recruiters to see what else we should be emphasizing. And we regularly refresh our recruitment campaigns to make sure that we remain out there and relevant to those seeking employment. I think you can't overstate the importance of the Ofsted judgment and what that will do to the Medway brand. So I think let's just keep a watching brief and let's just see what happens in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, thank you. On unaccompanied asylum seekers, as a foster carer, we had a child from Sudan, and it was war-torn at the time, and he was being, beaten up by Eritrean children because of his religion, and he was being threatened to join the army if he stayed. He came here, and he's a pharmacist now. He just graduated in the summer. We've had a long tradition of rescuing children, and we are a society that is compassionate to protect children, no matter where they come from or what the colour of their skin is. All children matter in Medway, whether they're disabled children or unaccompanied asylum seekers, children matter in Medway. And, you know, I sit here as a disabled woman. My mum is a traveller. My dad is half Jamaican and half Irish. He is here because we were there. So that's why I'm here. Thank you. Smitha.
Thank you, Jo. I also want to preamble my questions with hearty congratulations at this phenomenal turnaround that you have achieved in the services. I hope you celebrated, all of you. I hope there were a few glasses of wine involved, I really hope. And I hope all the loved ones in your life made a really big deal out of you as well, because from what I've heard from Jo as well, just a huge amount of work has gone into it. So I'm so proud to be serving on this committee alongside you, and to kind of just so proud to be Medway right now, you know, with this result. So thank you for your efforts. I also want to say your efforts are particularly heroic in the context of the absolutely brutal funding cuts that the current Conservative government have subjected local services to. Our communities, our local authorities have been left critically compromised, critically vulnerable. So, I mean, more kudos to you. Heroic efforts, you know, that in that context that you have managed to achieve, you know, this result. So I just, again, wanted to say thank you for that. Also, another remark before I go into the comments, as I'm also very proud that as a country and as Medway, we take in unaccompanied asylum seeker children. Long may that continue. I'm glad to see that that's accounted for and built into your services here. And I'm sure we can provide a good home and good services to unaccompanied children. I'm an immigrant myself, and I like to think I'm a testament to the fact that when people come into this country, they bring potential and can be great contributing members. I mean, obviously others might disagree whether I'm a contributing member to this society, but you know, as an immigrant myself, I feel that that's, I'm glad we're doing that and being a compassionate society, so thank you for that as well. On to my questions. Specifically on the area that requires improvement. I mean, you won't be surprised that I'm raising this, and in no ways to take away from your achievement. But it seems to me that they've mentioned in the Ofsted have mentioned in the report that the areas suffer from variable quality of social worker practice. So how are we addressing that? And I kind of wanted to also contextualize it in terms of the recruitment problems you're facing. I was going to ask, how do those two marry up? But Becky, you already mentioned quite clearly and strongly that quality will not be compromised in terms of recruitment, that you want the best and you want to foster that high expectations in the Medway workforce. So I'd still like to know what specific actions or steps have you got to address that specific issue of variable practice by social workers? And when do you hope to see those improvements kicking in so that we are, you know, safely ready for the next inspection? That was my first question. The second question I have is around fostering. So you've mentioned already that, again, there's a recruitment problem there, not enough foster parents being recruited in Medway. I attended the summer barbecue event at the, sorry, the name skips me, at the hub, yeah, where Sophie was the children, yeah. And I had some very, very interesting, oh, by the way, Sophie, thank you for being here. And I also noted in the report that the Medway Young People and Youth Council play a really important part in affecting the services that are provided. So well done for all that you do. Right, so back to the question. So I had some interesting conversations with some foster parents there, and I was really sad and disturbed to hear from one particular parent who said she is fostering a young child with exceptionally high needs and complex needs. And she told me that there was no peer support or support group kind of help available for her. And she was talking to other foster carers there who had children with maybe less complex needs, who were quite shocked by the amount of difficulty she was facing in providing a home for this child. And from what she told me, it's just her personal commitment that's keeping her in it. And she felt quite unsupported. I just thought that a peer support group where people can connect with other foster parents and kind of share tips and support each other was already available. That was my understanding. But she said that she had to seek it out herself.
I'll
And
answer more fully, but
that was the
yeah,
last
there
of
is.
my questions. So I just want to know, I want to have some reassurance that what's going on there. And see, she's not going to go out and recommend to people that people become foster carers. That's her experience. So she is committed to looking after the child, but she doesn't want to continue after that. So that's a bit sad for me. So I'd like to hear your view on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take the first question. So in respect of the children in need and protection and where we received requires improvement, that obviously covers a number of areas across the service. But your question was specifically around the variability and of practice. And I think that is settling down in respect of the workforce. And I think as soon as we pull on our permanent recruitment and that consistency of staffing across the service, that will support that consistency. What we've really embedded across our service is around high support and high challenge. And as Becky spoke earlier, it's not about bottom on seats. And it's ensuring that we have the right people within the service. And we're supporting people to achieve and ensure that their practice is good for children and young people across Medway. And part of that is how we learn and how we grow and develop together. And I think we work hard with Becky's service within quality assurance. And we learn from our audits, and then that impacts on the training that social workers and family support workers and early help workers undertake, which will improve practice. And it's knowing ourselves, and I think what we knew was our practice was variable and inconsistent. We know the areas that we need to improve, and I think it's continuing to learn from the work that we're doing is how we will improve it, and that consistency of staffing. And I know Becky wanted to pick up some around quality assurance.
Well, I think just to reassure you that the quality of practice is one of our key, well, it is our key area of development. As Kelly said, we run a tight ship within our practice development service, and which covers all of our auditing activity, but it also offers coaching, developmental opportunities, getting alongside workers and actually trying to unpick with workers what needs to change. And we do that on an individual basis, on a group basis. And we're not inadequate. So where our practice was inadequate, we've moved into requires improvement. And I think had we had a little bit more time and possibly COVID had left us alone, we'd have seen a bit more consistency across the whole of the workforce. But we know the areas that we want to improve on. And Leanne touched on our work with adolescents, and that was a key feature that we were able to be honest with Ofsted about during their inspection. And that's an area that sits within the Children's Social Work Service, so was impacted really quite heavily on that judgment. But we have a plan, we have a practice development plan, and we are committed to getting away with the variability and bringing some stability, not just into the workforce, but into the quality of practice.
So I'll take the fostering question. I'm a fostering sitting provider, and I'm really saddened and shocked and surprised because this is generally not the experience of foster carers in Medway. We talk to foster carers regularly. We meet with them every 6 weeks. We consult with them. We email regularly. We ask them to contribute to the service development, to present their views. There is a very comprehensive list of training, and if foster carers have individual needs, we can deliver bespoke training for that particular need that might not be present across the service. We also have mentoring schemes in place for foster carers. We have support groups, which we run and publish 1 year ahead of time. So I'm somewhat surprised that this hasn't landed quite well for this particular foster carer. I'm more than willing to, outside of this, take the name and go and check in and make sure that she has the help and support that she needs. You will have seen in the report, and has been verified, that foster carers generally in Medway feel supported, that they feel heard and listened to, that the service have travelled quite a significant journey to improve that. For example, we have managed to match the fostering fees that we pay with the national minimum fostering that the government has recommended us to do. That was really well welcomed by the foster carers. So this doesn't sound to me as the experience of foster carers in Medway. I absolutely take on board that there is always more to do and better to do, and there are sometimes people where it just doesn't land the way we intend to, and we are absolutely ready to learn and take that away and make sure that next time we don't have anyone who doesn't feel like they've been helped and supported.
I'll email you. Thank you.
Sorry, Damalola, please.
Just to echo what Joe and Smith have said, well done to Children's Services team and everything you do for Medway and asylum children as well. Just in terms of my question, so obviously you've mentioned independent fostering agencies. How are you regulating these independent fostering agencies to ensure that children are taken care of? And then also, what are you doing to ensure that you protect the children who are at risk of exploitation, especially being that we're using independent fostering agencies? Does that make it more difficult for you to do that? In addition to that, you've also mentioned you've mentioned in a report that Ofsted will be returning in a year. So that doesn't leave a lot of time, and I'm just wondering what has been done to date, or are there checkpoints in place to ensure that we're on the road to improvement, so when they do return, we have, some substantial improvements to show them? Thank you.
I'll take the IFA questions. So independent fostering agencies are being regulated under national framework, and the regulator for them is Ofsted in the same way that they regulate local authorities or children's home or independent children's home. And it's for the inspectorate to go in and check against the very tight framework of quality assurance elements, and they publish those judgments, and we are aware. The inspectorate also lets local authorities know if one of the fostering agencies have been judged inadequate, so we can take action to safeguard the children that are there. In addition to that, our commissioning colleagues are absolutely amazing in doing our own due diligence and making sure that we check those things, and especially with independent fostering agencies who sit on a framework, they go through a process of making sure that everything is right and appropriate, children are safe and safeguarded. You will also know that social workers visit regularly. We talk to children on an individual basis. We check with each child about what life is like for them and whether their needs are met there. So we have a number of lines of sight to make sure that the children are safe and protected. In terms of children at risk of exploitation, there is a lot of work that happens, and what we want to see is that this work becomes more coordinated, more consistent, and more children are able to benefit from this. Some of the work happens in the youth service that sits in my portfolio, and we do a lot of detached work. We do a lot of work with schools in terms of assessing risk and intervening and providing help and support where children suffered harm because of the contextual safeguarding concerns. We also have additional services that we provide to children who are known to children's services, again, to make sure that they have the help and support that they need and that the risk is diminished. I think that there are a number of work streams in place to give ourselves assurance that we continue to progress that work, and we regularly check those files and look into the children's journeys to assure ourselves of that. And I'll pass to my colleagues about the offset.
So in respect of exploitation, I'll pick up there. In January, we started missing and exploitation discussions within each service, and those meetings are chaired by our service managers to ensure that they know that the most risky children within their services, they discuss patterns, themes, trends, understanding each of those children and ensuring that as a multi-agency partnership, we're working together to reduce those risks. I think Ofsted, and I know they did comment that we had a robust oversight of our missing children, and we undertake return home interviews for all of our children. We've got 2 return home interview officers in Medway who will support social workers in undertaking those visits to understand the experience of those children when they've been missing, why, and look at the push and pull factors and look at what we can put in place to support them not going missing again and not to be at risk of further exploitation. I think that's covered the question. Thank you.
In terms of going forward with Ofsted, we don't stop. We're very open and transparent with Ofsted. We told them those were our areas of weakness. They looked and concurred with us. We still carry on. One could say if maybe they'd have come 6 months later, we would have been in a stronger position, but we're not starting from scratch. It took Kent County Council 12 years of improvement to get to outstanding, and we've had 4, so we carry on. Yeah, thank you.
Are you happy, Damilola? Yeah.
Happy, thank you.
Leah, please.
I feel like we're all going to start with congratulating everybody, so huge congratulations. It was a testament to the hard work and dedication that you've all put in. And then on to my questions. The first one was that how much of an impact is the expected care review and the stopping of agency project teams and bank teams likely to have on staffing costs? It seems insane to me that if we say we need someone, one person for maternity cover, they go, well, here you go, have 6 and pay them all at inflated rates. So I wondered if you had figures on how much that's likely to improve. And then what are 28-day fostering placements? Is it that we assess and approve foster people that apply to be foster carers within 28 days? No. So how does it differ from what we were doing before, and how are we ensuring that they're sufficiently vetted? And then the last one is a bit more in depth. So I was hoping to drill down a bit into placing children in unregulated provision. Is that sort of what would normally be if you come through a homelessness route and get placed in supported accommodation, where it says then nobody's placed in a B&B, but they are placed in supported accommodation? Is that the same kind of provision that would be? So I guess I'll start that question with just what is unregulated provision, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, colleagues. So the 28-day fostering placements. Sometimes children come into our care in very, very difficult situations. Sometimes there is a crisis happening and neighbors call in and police knocks on the door, and what we know about these children is their names and their ages and very, very little else. And then it's very, very difficult to find the right home for these children because we know so little about them. So we say to foster carers sometimes, can you come forward, can you look after these children? And there's some understanding reluctance to do that. It's also sometimes very difficult to understand whether these children can be parented safely alongside other children, and that creates sometimes some tensions. So what we're seeking to do is to have a number of foster carers who can take these children, as it were, no questions asked. They can start to parent them. We can start to understand their needs. We can complete their statutory health assessment. They can have their dental checks. We can have their personal education plan, touch in with schools, and so on and so forth. So we can build this picture that helps us understand what kind of home does this child need for the remainder of their childhood. So this is the purpose of this foster placements, where we get a really good understanding of the children and their needs, and then we can match them appropriately to a parent who can meet that need.
So just on that then, is in permanence, so in our permanent stats and things, does that then count as a, if they're then replaced somewhere else, does that then count as a move for that child?
Yeah, it will count, yeah.
Okay, so Bake's one in. I see the need for it, but does Baker move into those stats?
Yeah, but it's a trade that we will have to make in order to make sure we understand the children and they are then placed with the right carers, and then they have the right help and support, of course. The other question was about placing children in unregulated provision and whether supported accommodation is that. And the simple answer is not. So supported accommodation is a provision that was able to be delivered to children in a way that has been unregulated. And you will have seen that there was a lot of lobbying from the Children's Commissioner in England, and the government has taken a position on that and developed a framework, and they invited providers to come in and be registered against that framework. The registration opened in April and it closes on the 20th of October. 27, thank you, sorry. And once you've submitted all of the papers, Ofsted checks all of that, and then they come and visit the provider, and then they issue the registration for that. An unregulated provision is a provision that operates outside of this regulation, and there is some tension currently, and the sector is a bit worried about the new regulation coming in, because what we know is that there are children who live in these homes, They have their needs met, they are thriving, they are achieving there, but some of these providers are not seeking to be registering. And then I don't think that overnight that makes the right decision necessarily to just say these children are not safe here when they've lived there sometimes for many years and their needs have been met there. So there has been a lot of research, a lot of reports published about what's likely to happen in the sector and what the impact is likely to be. But I think as a result of the new regulatory framework coming in, we will see a number of children tipping into this unregulated provision because not all of the providers are seeking to do that or will meet the deadline to do that.
So how does, in terms of that person who is living there, how does an unregulated provision differ from a regulated one? Does it really make an impact to that child who is now living in that provision? How much impact does it make on their life?
And that's on an individual basis. And there are a number, as I explained, a number of lines of sight that assure ourselves as the corporate parents that these children are getting a good deal, that their needs are being met. And the inspector at Ofsted is one of those, but it's not the only one. We visit those children. Our commissioning colleagues complete quality assurance checks. We reach out to them. They have advocates that talk about their wishes and feelings. There are independent reviewing officers. So we know on a child-by-child basis where their needs are being met, and we have a number of ways of assuring ourselves. If you read the Ofsted report very carefully, which we did, obviously, you will see that they were quite happy with the way we respond to these children and how we make sure that their needs are met.
Okay, thanks, Leah. Next, Adrian.
Thank you, Joe. And I also want to have a little ramble before I get to my questions, but I'm also going to have another pre-ramble. Because I'd like to say thank you for all the officers involved in the data workshop session on Tuesday evening. I found that very, very good. The quality information that was available there was excellent. And, it certainly spurred my mind to ask a few questions this evening, which I think was the objective. So thanks for that. Yes, we've all got to say, yes, this is fantastic news where we are. But it's right that we've got to keep up the momentum. And for once, I'm going to agree with Vince. And I think he's right when he said that the best way of ensuring that we don't slip back is that we're determined to go forward to outstanding. And I think that's got to be our attitude going forward. I was going to ask questions on each of the areas that we need to improve, but I think three of them have been quite adequately covered by previous questions. But there's one that's not been asked about, and that is the quality and variety of direct work and the life story work available to children. Now, I know, from when I was a portfolio holder responsible for legal services, that this was quite a difficult area, as there was an enormous amount of paperwork to churn through, and the vast majority of it had to have an enormous amount of redacting done. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it is a fundamental right that people, young children in care, have access to their life story, particularly as they get older. I think that is a very fundamental right. So the thought occurs to me, are we using Mosaic in a way that could enable this? So when the young person's life story is put into that system, that can it be done in a way that it's easier to retrieve that information that might be wanted later on without having a very laborious job of later on going through it and doing all that redacting. The other thing I thought was covered very well with the report was the workforce work, because that is absolutely key. That is what this is all, as well as being about young people, of course, but it's also very much about our workforce. So I think, Joe, it'd be good if we could have perhaps some report in a few months' time of how that workforce development is going forward, because we've got to keep up our scrutiny on this. For all of us, that's absolutely vital, because although I wasn't on a scrutiny member in 2019, I think we weren't collectively, all of us, doing our scrutiny well enough at that time, because basically we didn't know what was going on. And I'll be perfectly honest, what's happened at the time, those officers have moved on, so I'm not going to insult anybody here. We were told persistently, counsellor, everything in the gardens rosy, nothing to worry about. And unfortunately, we were stupid enough to swallow that story. Well, none of us are ever going to swallow that one again. And, you know, I think we've all got a duty, all of us, members and officers, to make sure we don't slip back on that. On sufficiency, it's good to see that Eden House at long last has been put back into use. Though I've got to be honest, I do find it difficult to understand why it's taken so long to get where we are, because Five Rivers have long departed. And I also noticed in the capital budget report later on this evening that it should have been in use in September, so we've already slipped again. But one of the things we've got to do, if we're going to have sufficient places here in Medway for our young people so they're not sent all over the place, we've got to have more residential facilities, as well as the excellent work that's done by our foster carers, of course, here in Medway. And it's good to see that you're now working with the private sector as well to ensure that these places come forward here in Medway. That's good. But this thing I'm going to ask is applies both to our in-house provision and also the private sector provision. We want good quality people to be working in those homes with the young people. What have we got? We've talked a lot about how we're training our social workers, and I know we're doing it with adult social care. We've been running training schemes to get people up to MVQ level. So what have we got in place here in Medway to train up the people who are going to be working with these young people on a day-to-day basis? Because if we want to have places for our young people in Medway, we've got to have the trained staff. So what are we doing to make sure that we've got good trained staff here in Medway to look after our young people at that level? Thank you.
Yeah, I can take the Eden House question. I mean, there is a process with registering a children's home which involves, obviously, registration with Ofsted. You can't register with Ofsted until you've got a registered manager in post, responsible individual, etc. We went out to advert. It sort of ties into a question you've made about quality, point you made about the quality and availability of staff. There is nationally a massive shortage of registered managers. The salaries for registered managers have literally gone through the roof, and I think we went out 3 times before we've secured a registered manager. We now have a registered manager who's working through their notice before joining us. To give you an example, I spoke to another local authority earlier this year who have been waiting 2 years to open their children's home, and they've been through 4 registered managers and they haven't even opened yet. So it's a real national challenge. I've spent the day, fortunately, we have 2 deputy managers appointed. We've got our registered manager come joining us in, I think it's January, and we are interviewing for team leaders today and tomorrow. So that it's moving apace now in terms of recruitment. But the moment that registered manager is in place, the application will go into Ofsted, and we'll then work within the Ofsted framework to get in-house registered and young people admitted.
Sorry, and I can talk about the training because I'm from Parklands, it's in my portfolio. So every person that we employ to work in the children's home, if they haven't got the qualification, we support them to do that. There are apprenticeships in place to complete the level 3, 4 or 5 in children's homes. To make sure that we're compliant with that. We give people the time to make sure that they have the headspace to be able to do their job and look after their families and also study and deliver what they need to deliver for their qualifications. And we also offer them a lot of personal one-to-one support to get them through that.
And I can take the question on direct work. So luckily, like you, we share an aspiration for outstanding. So I think that's one thing that we can all have in common today. But that's the same for the quality of direct work. What I can say is we have seen an improvement, but it's not where we want to be. We have now got somebody who's solely employed with that role to complete direct work. That's our aspiration for all children, particularly children in care, to have direct work completed for them. Also, the Regional Adoption Agency complete direct work later life letters, etc., for all our children that go through adoptive placements. And we've learned a lot from the RAA, and actually we've used the quality of that work to help support, improve the quality of the work. So we are reaching out to partner agencies to help support the quality of direct work. We also use our independent reviewing officers to offer high support and high challenge where it's not good enough for children, and then action plans are put in place to ensure that children receive a good quality direct work. Unfortunately, some of that is hindered by staffing, so we can't pretend that the impact of vacancies impacts on that being completed in a timely way, but we constantly review that, and it's where we want to be. And Mosaic. So we thought very hard about Mosaic. We've recently invested a lot of money in improving the Mosaic forms, and you'll be aware that that's a project that's currently going through. So it is improving recording, but it would be wrong for me to say that that would produce something that would be downloadable and useful for children. However, we have changed how we're communicating with children, how we're writing case notes. I can speak for the IRO service, who are now writing letters regularly to children, and they're the things that can then contribute to life story work. So I think, Councillor Goldwyn, you have a good point about how we record, but I think it's some and some that wouldn't be able to be solely life story work and direct work.
Do you want to come back? Are you okay?
Very good answers. Thanks, Jo.
You're welcome. Paula, please.
Thank you, Jo. So, like everybody else, really well done, fantastic, and I really hope that you think about how well you've done every day when you come into work. Maybe not when you have time off, though, after such a long time. I just wanted to pick up on the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and also children victims of human trafficking. And I'm absolutely delighted that under the current Labour administration, we are now taking those children's rights and needs seriously here in Medway, and that Medway is now a place that can be called home for all children, regardless of their situation. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted. As someone who worked in human rights, the UN Convention on the Rights of Children is something really important that we as a local authority should be taking seriously, and I think this is a really good demonstration of that. I wanted to turn to page 23, if that's okay. And I wanted to ask, under 4.22, the government consultation paper on child and family social worker workforce. Obviously, there's been a lot of planning about how we build stability, how we get consistency in terms of the workforce, and what that means in terms of our ability to provide the services that our children need. But what are the implications for us of the outcome of this consultation and the potential rule changes? What steps are we taking to contingency plan for that now? And also, just in terms of all things recruitment, now that we are good, according to Ofsted, what does that mean in terms of our attractiveness as somewhere to come and work if you are in the children and young people's sphere?
I'll deal with the attractiveness. I'll deal with the simpler one. It absolutely means everything. One of the big issues that I grappled with when I first came to Medway was how do you sell an inadequate local authority as a good place to work? Well, we had to be creative. We absolutely did, because even though Medway's children's social care was inadequate, the rest of Medway Council was not inadequate, and there were many, many benefits that I quickly recognised, and we were able to build our recruitment and retention policy around that. But it's not easy for social workers, or it's not easy to get social workers to come and work in an inadequate local authority, because things are inadequate, the obvious, but also you are under enormous scrutiny. absolutely everything you do is put under a microscope, and that can be quite harrowing, really, year after year for social workers. So I pay absolute credit to those social workers who are committed to Medway, who have stayed in Medway, and those who, the children's services staff, whether it's social workers or others who have come to join us. So now, being good, it is a fabulous opportunity. There is a lot of interest nationally about, well, what did you do, Medway? What are some of the things we can learn? Oh, that might be a good place to work, to advance my career or get involved in some of the initiatives that my colleagues have spoken about. So it's all to play for, really, once you're a good local authority. And I'll pass over to my colleagues for the first bit of your question.
I just wanted to add there about being an attractive local authority, and we know that we're good now. We worked really hard as a team, as a service. All of our staff have worked really hard. I think one of our selling points is that we have a permanent workforce as at a senior level, and our staff want to achieve with us as well. And I think that really came out in our Ofsted inspection from the inspectors, was that our staff won't settle for good. They want to go to outstanding, and that's our locum staff as well. And I think we're already hearing the word in the office with the locum staff is actually, I'm thinking about joining Medway because I like the support I get. So it is really positive at the moment.
So lucky me, I'll do 422. Look, this is a change that the sector system leaders have been advocating for and asking for time and time again. We know that there is a disparity and lack of equity. You have people doing the same job, the same work, building the same relationship and being rewarded in different ways. So it's definitely something that will help us. I think it's a really positive way forward. McAllister, in his report, talked about this, and then the government picked it on and worked on implementing it. There has been really wide consultation. The sector is aware that this is coming. It's on the horizon. I think it's spurring some of the workers to consider about converting from locum into permanent workers. And I think it's right that they introduce all of these standards to make sure that people who want to do this work are really qualified and ready to do that. What we're doing in Medway about this is we're having conversations with social workers, we're offering them the opportunity to convert, we're helping them understand the benefits of doing that, and we are ready and prepared. When the government says we are ready to go live with this, I think we are really ready to respond to this.
Happy, Paula?
All good.
Thank you. Right, I'm really delighted to welcome Oliver with his question. It's so nice to see young people here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to extend my congratulations and the Youth Council's congratulations to you guys. I think it's really important that young people and children matter in Medway, and it's really good to see that Ofsted have found that. Just my question is on recruitment processes. Do you guys offer degree apprenticeships, or is it just like normal apprenticeships? I just wanted to know that because I know young people, especially in my school and in other schools around Medway as well, have been looking into degree apprenticeships instead of just taking the route, go to uni, take a lot of debt. So it'll be interesting to know if you do offer degree apprenticeships.
The simple answer is yes, we do. And that you will have seen that reflected in our newly qualified social workers that have joined just this month. 3 of those did the apprenticeship route, and that's at degree level. So we're delighted to welcome them, and that's something that we're committed to.
And it's not just for social workers. Karen might know that we do that in the youth service as well, and we've offered people the same opportunity because we recognise that they make a very important contribution.
And I'd like to say at the barbecue, it was so lovely to meet those people because they were Tigger-like ambassadors for Medway and spoke about, like feeling like they're oak trees now, but coming from small acorns was just tremendous. Great question, Oliver. Thank you.
Can I come in there? I think we really aspire to grow in our own. I think it's in the workforce slides that we shared, 5 out of our newly qualified social workers were social work apprentices. And I think we've got a lot of people, including myself, that started as a volunteer in Medway. I did my newly qualified social work training in Medway, which I was supported to by Medway. So I feel like I've been invested by Medway, and I think that's really important. So me and my team are really keen to invest in Medway and young people.
Thank you, Kelly. Do you want to come?
No, I just want to say thank you for your response. Yeah, I think it's, I'd also like to say it's very important that people are staying in Medway. You've seen in the news recently about Wales, how young people are leaving Wales because they feel there's lack of job opportunities. So it's really good that you are growing, our own. Thank you.
Mark, you're next.
Thank you very much, Joe, and I'll add my congratulations to officers, to all those that have gone before me. I was confident that this would be the finding when I met the people who were looking after children preparing to leave care and went to visit the hub, and I saw the good work which was going on there. I was confident that this work would be recognised by Ofsted, and congratulations to our people. And in terms of the politics of it, the politicians, post-2019, I would like to endorse what has been said by a couple of people previously about Josie Isles, who was my predecessor in Strood West, and about Clive Johnson on the other side of the political spectrum. I'm afraid that there my goodwill ends, because I want to talk about adolescence a little bit, or question a little bit about adolescence. And my view is, if I can do a Adrian Starr preamble, my take is on that we need to get things right in the early years. And we have suffered in this country from the period of austerity and locally by the closures to children's centres which took place, and the priority needs much more to be in the early years to resolve problems or resolve issues when we come on to the adolescent and later in life. George says he's had a good time in Manchester, or I assume that he has, and I listened with interest to what the Prime Minister had to say about post-16 and attracting teachers to deliver that. But we really need as well to be looking at the early years. So if I can come on to the question that I had in mind, in terms of adolescence, I was a bit disappointed to see that there were issues about the longer term support provided to adolescents, because I thought we had a team that was focused on this, and we've already heard about the good work of the youth service and so on. And I wondered what the plan was to rectify this, particularly in terms of mental health. Because the paperwork we've been given goes on to talk about mental health support, and clearly the need for mental health support is happening at an earlier and earlier age, sort of early years of secondary school and so on, onwards. We hear a lot at meetings that these issues are being addressed, and the issues of CAMS, waiting lists and so on, but this doesn't seem to result in any improvement on the ground. So I wondered if the director and or her colleagues could give us some, our colleagues could give us some thoughts today about the next steps in terms of improving the offer to adolescents in the longer term.
Okay, I'll try and answer that question. So we recognise ourselves, and we told Ofsted that our the work and our intervention with young people, our adolescents, wasn't where it needed to be. And since Ofsted and before Ofsted, we were looking as a team as how we improve that service for young people. I think what our aspiration was, and I think if you think when we set up the service in 2020, I think it was, our aspiration was to ensure that young people had a consistent workforce for our adolescents. I think what we found is that working with young people is challenging. I think the workforce that we'd hoped would provide stability hasn't been able to be created, and I think we know that we need to do something different. So there are steps currently in place to review the work that we're doing within our adolescent and manage it in a different way. In respect of clear details about that, I don't feel I'm able at this point to share that, and probably at the next overview and scrutiny we can provide more information. But I think we know that by doing that, that will ensure that we offer a better service to our adolescents.
Do you want to come back, Mark?
Not at this stage. I would welcome something at the next meeting. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you. Aaron?
Following on nicely from what Mark just said, actually. First, I want to congratulate you. I love the strapline, can I just say? I think it's just an amazing strapline. And moving forward to get to outstanding, it's all about, I feel that this is like something that we might be missing. Ingrid said about the training that we give our foster carers, and we put so much support into them, and they have such great knowledge. And I feel, as an ex-foster carer for 20 years, and all my friends are foster carers, I feel like that when we have the exit meeting at the foster, is it spoken about that the apprentice? I know lots of ex-foster carers that would have loved, if they had known about it, the social worker apprentice, and all the things that were inadequate, and the storyline. You've got people there that are trained, that are burnt out from doing fostering, but have got so much knowledge that can help in all these adolescents, life stories. And let's face it, they're still in contact with us. So when we then need some more foster carers, they're already on our radar, they're already, and maybe they are fulfilled again and not burnt out again and are ready to foster. And with the influx of unaccompanied children coming over, they would be perfect for people that had already fostered before and had left foster care but had still been part of the community. And I feel like we should be asking them questions on the exit of interview of fostering. Would you still like to be involved? Is there something else we could do, whether that was on voluntary, part-time? And could we contact you again if we feel that something comes up? I just feel that we're putting so much effort, and these people become foster carers because they want to help, and they want to help the local community, and just to say goodbye to them. I know that I wanted to come back in 3 years after I finished. I was fine. But it's a jump, but if we're already still in that community, then it's not a bigger jump to go back into fostering.
I think it's a really good point, and can I assure you we started to do that. So we offer every foster care an exit interview, and as part of that we ask them, can you help us with training? Can you help us with mentoring? Can you help us with recruitment? Here's a number of ways you can help us, what would work for you, and how we continue to collaborate. And we have had foster carers or former foster carers agreeing to come and deliver part of the training to new candidates and new families, and doing the mentoring scheme. So there is already some work in progress. It's kind of early days. Give us a bit more time and you'll start to see more of this snowballing in, and you'll see the effects of that.
And that's why I know we'll be outstanding very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got Liz next.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I think it's right that all members here this evening have congratulated you, and you know, I do the same, having been, you know, sitting on this you know, committee since we unfortunately received that judgment back in 2019. I know the work that you have all and your teams that you represent, you know, this evening have put in. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think it kind of makes for a difficult scrutiny meeting this evening in many ways, because we want to remain positive and focus on all the good work that you've done. But I know that you do also appreciate the scrutiny that we put in, and you know, to be that sort of critical friend, if you like, to move forward and move to outstanding. And I also sort of thank you for the training that's gone on in the past sort of 4 years with the data workshops and making us as members more informed so that we can do, you know, our role better as well. So, yeah, thank you for that. So moving on to sort of my questions and where I'll perhaps be a bit more critical is just sort of looking at those areas where we are still requires improvement. And I think it's very important that we are very vocal about that. And you know, I think if you're a family or a young person that sits within that bit of requires improvement, you don't want to feel forgotten. You know, we're celebrating good, but for some families, it's not good. And I think we need to remember that and to sort of remain sort of very vocal about that and to sort of say what we're doing to improve those services. Unfortunately, you know, I was a family that sat within that area, and in some ways it came as no surprise to me that it was requires improvement, because unfortunately that was the experience I had. But I'm, you know, confident that you're doing a lot of work in those areas, and I hope to see that coming up to good and outstanding in the time. So with regards to this sort of action plan that you spoke about, is that something that we can sort of see in more detail so that we can kind of monitor that and, you know, see that progress is being made over time? So that's one area. Because I'd like to know sort of, is it staffing levels? Is it particular qualifications in those areas? Because it's very different to be a social worker for sort of a looked after child than it is a social worker for a child with disabilities, for example. They're very different, aren't they? So do we, you know, when we're recruiting, are we making sure that we're recruiting the social workers with the right experience? Moving on to sort of what Councillor Campbell mentioned about foster carers, sort of, she had, you know, a foster carer that spoke to her. Again, that's something that I've heard. About 6 or 7 years ago, I set up a support group for families with children with, you know, disabilities. And it came, you know, not long after I set this group up, it was a lot of foster carers coming along, and they would say to me, there's just nowhere else for us to go. And, you know, they really appreciated having that group. And, you know, I think, you know, on the fostering panel as well, I sort of, families that have got children with complex needs. I think perhaps when they were saying complex needs, they meant as in disabilities. I don't know, but I know that's something you're going to take offline, but, you know, they just felt there is kind of nowhere to go. There's no other foster carers to provide respite. So I just wanted to know sort of what we're doing in those areas. And I know I've mentioned Demelza before, and I'll keep sort of highlighting them because they do fantastic work. I know they're a charity, but I know that there's work that we can do with maybe commissioning services. So I'd like to know if that's something we're looking at. Are we talking to them? They may not be able to provide all what we need, but it'd be good to know that we're having conversations with them and seeing if they can assist. And then finally, just going back to the unaccompanied children, I just wanted to know a bit more about the sort of the funding and how that matches the actual, because I know there is funding from central government, something like 115 to 145, I think, pounds per week. But how does that actually, you know, what is the actual cost? So, you know, how much more are we having to put in or not, or does that cover the cost? And I think, you know, political colours aside, you know, in this scrutiny we need to be, you know, we will lobby government if that's what we need to do, if we need more funding. So I think, in some ways, I think it's not helpful in how we sit in scrutiny. I've mentioned that before. I think it'd be good if we kind of were a bit more mixed up so that we can leave our politics at the door if it's possible, because I think regardless, we you know, we want government to provide us as a, you know, local authority with what we need. So definitely up for that. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, and we value scrutiny. We absolutely do, because it was scrutiny played a huge part in this achievement of getting to good. It's a system. You know, we do our bit, you do your bit, we all do our bit together. And, you know, I hear what you're saying about the seating arrangements, but I'll leave that for others to decide. The unaccompanied asylum seeking question, I responded to Robbie about that, because I don't know just at the minute. We're new to it. Dave might be able to give you a pounds and pence sort of answer, but there are some positive spin-offs. Do you want to have a go at that? It's a little hard at the minute because we're just new to it. But
it is a kind of an ever-changing picture and developing picture, and it kind of changes kind of probably on a weekly basis, doesn't it, at the moment? Certainly what was in the round one forecast, and I knew this was going to come back up when we got to the budget monitoring kind of reports, we didn't kind of add to Leanne's comments earlier. In the round one forecast, there is a net pressure of £1.3 million associated with the cost of the asylum seekers. That was at that point. I think that position is improving now, and when we see the round two forecast come through, we'll see an improved position on that. But there is definitely a fairly significant cost attached to the kind of the funding, the shortfall in funding compared to the actual cost that it costs us to put those unaccompanied asylum seekers in placements. The commissioning team are constantly looking at different ways to kind of meet that need, and so the forecast we've got at the moment may well kind of improve, hopefully will improve further as we go through and actually understand what our full kind of requirement is for placements and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I hope that helps a bit, but obviously in terms of lobbying, you'd be amazed how many requests we've got in finance now to kind of add kind of our Medway's kind of numbers to kind of various lobbying groups for kind of going back to central government for additional funding, not just related to unaccompanied asylum seekers, but all aspects of kind of children's social care spend and adult social care spend as well, where the majority of all of our pressures are in kind of councils like ourselves up and down the country.
I think if we just let that work through a little bit, we'll be able to give you a better answer to that in due course in terms of funding. The support, you know, we work in partnership with many organisations, and I'm pleased to see Lisa sitting up there at the end, you know, representative of Medway's Parent and Carers Forum, because, you know, the support that people like Lisa and her teams offer is phenomenal. We would never be able to be everything to all, never in a million years. We don't have the resource, and I don't think we actually have all the skills necessary, and I think it's not right that Medway thinks it can put all its eggs in one basket. We need to work as a community, but I take your point about making sure that all those who need support are either supported or signposted. So we continue to do that. But I'm going to hand over to my colleagues who know the detail better than I do.
Thank you, Leanne. Again, I'm not going to rehearse what I've said in terms of the feedback that foster carers give us and what we hear in terms of the help and support that they have. I absolutely recognize that there is a shortage of foster carers who can meet the needs of children with disabilities, and that sadly is not unique to Medway. It's something that every local authority is struggling with. We absolutely want to see more children with disabilities being able to live in homes rather than in children's homes, living with foster carers and having that family wrap around them. I think that there are a number of strands of work currently in play in the fostering service to make sure that the support groups are there to help people, the carers that they need this additional support. We have fostering mentors. We have a number of other ways to offer bespoke help and support. I know we've recruited a number of foster carers specifically as respite for children with disabilities. I know we've invested in equipment because some children have physical disabilities and require that. So my feeling is that we are on a trajectory of improvement, that we have delivered better services and better support to foster carers. As I said, I'll take that away if that's not the experience for absolutely everyone, and we're going to investigate and look into individual situations. And I think that the other point that I'd like to make is, again, I'm aware and know of children in our care with disabilities who access Parklands, which is a short breaks children's home, and then children in our care have additional support through that, and the foster carers have respite. And also Parklands is running a support group and coffee mornings for these parents of children with disabilities, and again offering more wraparound, more support, and finding ways for these parents to be able to build the emotional resilience that each needs to meet to be able to parent and meet the needs of their children.
Do you want to come back, Liz?
Briefly, thank you. Yeah, thanks very much for that answer. I think if we can sort of kind of make contact with them to find out, because I think sometimes when you're living in that kind of high needs kind of environment, sometimes actually it's just that one extra job you can't do to sort of say, you know, like I need a bit more help, because you're just coping day to day. So I think if we can actually go to them and say, you know, just make sure they're being signposted to the relevant places, that would be helpful. And just also on the action plan, if that's something that can come forward at a later date. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Damilola.
Thank you. So I had some questions about sibling groups. How are sibling groups treated, and what steps are you taking to ensure they stay together, whether that's in adoption, fostering or residential care? And then the second question, is it more difficult to find suitable homes for children above the age of 12? And if so, how are you mitigating this? Thank
you. Yes. Sibling groups and finding appropriate homes for them is a significant challenge, especially if there are large sibling groups. Fostering regulations allow one foster care to care for up to 4 children, so that absolutely limits the number that sibling groups can live together. If you have a sibling group that 7, 8, 10 children, then it's going to present challenges. What we're trying to do is, if we are in the situation where we have to separate children, and sometimes we do, we always do that on a basis of an assessment. We always do that because we understand what their needs are, and we don't do it randomly, as it were. So there's always an explanation, a rationale, an assessment that talks to their needs and explains to us why the decision needs to be made. And when we do that, what we ask foster carers, what we ask those who offer care, is that they communicate with each other, that those children get to see each other. And this is not just about once every 6 weeks they've been taken into a place and they have an hour and a half. But with the new social media, children can more readily have a video or phone call with a sibling who lives in a different household, and making sure that those lines of communications are open and we don't sever those relationships when it's absolutely not in the best interest of the children to do that. In terms of children older than the age of 12, it's part of the sufficiency strategy. We talk about the difficulty that we have sometimes to find homes for those children. And what we are trying to do to mitigate against that, you'll find in the sufficiency strategy, it's offering additional help and support to foster carers to be able to do that, increasing our children's homes footprint in Medway, and then working with the providers locally to be able to have that resource if we need to find the care arrangement for an older child.
You happy with that, Damilola? Okay, the final speaker or question is Paula, please.
Thank you, Jo. I just wanted to return to this question about the cost implications of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. When you look at the challenges that we're facing in terms of children in care, I think to focus in on that is probably a little bit problematic, because we have increasing numbers of children in care, we've got increasing numbers of large sibling groups, we've got increasing complexities and needs of young people. So actually, we're facing a significant challenge after 13 years of austerity and cuts to local government funding in terms of how do we balance increasingly complex needs across a range of young people and children, and at the same time less money coming from central government to do that. So I'm just wondering, rather than hone in on a small number of children, let's look at the bigger picture here and the complexity and the challenge that we face as a local authority in dealing with a very different picture than we've had before. And I'm just wondering what sort of analysis and thoughts you have. Obviously, that has a big impact in terms of our risk management. Where are we going in terms of that, and looking at ways to navigate that very difficult situation?
You're absolutely right. Every child that comes into our care, whether that's through a parent wishing their child to come into our care through Section 20, or whether it's the courts granting us a full care order, and then Medway Council is responsible when we have a statutory duty, or whether it's unaccompanied asylum-seeking children arriving in Medway community, they all come into our care. There is a cost, and there is an ongoing cost, because it doesn't just stop. You know, when a young person turns 18, as soon as that young person becomes a care leaver, we have responsibilities right up until the age of 25. So there's ongoing costs, responsibilities, as you would expect. So we've rehearsed some of the issues tonight. Lack of sufficiency in terms of loving homes, that's expensive. You know, it's straight out supply and demand. There is you know, a huge demand. There is no supply. It is expensive, and it continues. So at that point, we become part of the national picture. And managing demand is hard. We all have cash limits. We all have budgets that we work towards. And it's a difficult thing to manage. Demand management of people, of our citizens, of our young people in Medway is difficult to manage. And I think each and every one of us here would have a view on whether we have enough resources, whether we have enough skills, whether we have enough homes. It's continual. But the sufficiency strategy that is in these papers gives you an idea about how we are managing that. We're aware of the issues. We know what we're trying to drive towards the Eden House project. It's not quick work because it's highly regulated, as it should be. These are vulnerable young children. So all of that coming together can actually provide us with quite a depressing picture. However, the work that we've done, as all of you have congratulated us tonight, Medway is a good service for its children, for its vulnerable children and those who need our care, those who are part of our universal offer, those in our schools. The whole picture is bright, but we do have absolute demand. And, you know, I'm looking over at Dave from finance. I'm sure we give Dave an absolute sleepless night sometimes because the demand is just going up and up sometimes, and you don't get a choice. We do our best to work with the resources we've got. Sometimes we do a better job, sometimes we don't. But on the whole, with our Ofsted report, our sufficiency strategy, our workforce strategy, we are managing those two big levers.
Thank you. Before I go to the Vice Chair, I just want to say we've all appreciated, you know, how good you are now, and we're so grateful for that. And some of us were lucky enough to go to the Priestfields. So I think it would be remiss of us, and we've got good manners here, not to say a big thank you to the Jills, because I know they went over and above to appreciate you as well. And it was just a lovely evening, and your team rock. They really do, especially this one on the end here. And just to clarify, Leah, I think I'm right that we need to add the part about workforce development, an update on adolescents, and support for foster not just foster parents, but groups with SEND children that might feel a bit isolated, so sort of giving them a bit of scaffolding. So over to my Vice Chair.
So I did indicate to speak, so I had one other recommendation that I wanted to kind of seek assent on, I guess. I was going to do it under the IROs, but with all the talk of lobbying and out-of-area placements and things, I thought it just made sense here. So out-of-area placements make up almost the same amount of children within our own care. So I wondered if we could request that the relevant cabinet members write to the Department of Family Wellbeing and see what they're doing nationally, because clearly this is just yet more evidence that everything is crumbling. So what are they doing nationally to try and fix the sufficiency issue so that we're not having 400 out-of-area children placed within Medway? And if there was a...
That's great. Yeah, we'll pick that one up as well, please, Leah.
Now I need to rewrite the notes that I had that. But in that case, I move that we note the reports on the Children's Services update, and that we would in future receive a quarterly report on workforce development, an update on adolescents, support for SEN, and that we ask Cabinet to write to the Department of Family Wellbeing.
Agreed? Agreed. Seconded, sorry, I forgot to second.
Awesome.
And agreed. Thank you, guys. So, agenda item 6, and we're nearly on time. Independent Reviewing Officers Annual Report. Becky, please.
I'm going to deal with this one. Thanks, Jo. Yes, Becky Cooper is the author of this report, but given the time, I'm going to just give you a brief overview. Statutory requirement. This report doesn't go up to the Ofsted period. It stops at the end of March 23. So I'm not going to go into much more. I'll just open it up for questions because I think the report is quite self-explanatory, Chair. Thank you.
Adrian?
Thank you, Jo. I thought it was a very interesting report to read. And but one thing that did strike me as being interesting, and it was mentioned earlier, was the letters the IROs write to children. That quite intrigued me. And I wondered if we could be sent some suitably redacted copies of those letters, from different age groups, because I think that would give us as members a really good insight into some of the things going on behind the scenes, because I think it's important for us, not only to sort of keep on top of these things, but also to have an understanding. And I think those letters perhaps could be a good mechanism. I was quite, and I was delighted to see that they were making a great effort to make them age appropriate, for instance, and perhaps some of the younger ones. Letters could be more suitable for members, I don't know, but thank you, Jo.
Okay, thank you.
We would welcome the opportunity to share those. So if you could allow my IRO manager to work on redacting those, we'll get 2 or 3 as a selection. What I would say is the letters are specifically to summarise for that individual child what's been spoken about at their child and care review meeting. So they will all look very different because different things are talked about. And those meetings are child-led. We deal with all the statutory stuff outside of those meetings, but the meeting themselves is about what the child wants to talk about. But we'll happily do that and distribute accordingly. To Stephanie, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Brilliant, Leah. Oh, sorry if I missed you. Naughty. Call me Joanne.
I had just a brief question on IRA caseloads that was why they seem to be so much higher here than our South East neighbours.
In the IRO handbook, IRO, which there's a link to in the report, so if you're interested to understand the wider IRO duties or our statutory responsibilities, that's in legislation. The recommended caseload for IROs is between 50 and 70, and in Medway, we've done very well at sticking really between 60 and 70. Very occasionally we go over that, and that's normally with more experienced IROs, or if, for example, there's periods of vacancies, we'll need to make sure that every child has an IRO. But you'll see from the report that we've done well with keeping our workforce. And I'm satisfied that in Medway you get a good caseload as an IRO, and it sits within national recommendations.
But there didn't seem to be a specific reason why we're much higher than, like...
Which bit, can I just ask which bit you're referring to? Because that's not my understanding for caseloads
So
in Medway.
3.7.
3.7, thank you.
No, sorry, that's me reading the wrong bit. It wasn't about caseloads, it was about children being placed further away from home.
Ah, okay.
Sorry. It said caseloads at the beginning of the thing. So
Sorry, yeah.
But why why so many children are being placed 20 miles, more than 20 miles outside Medway?
One of the things you have to remember is 20 miles outside of Medway can be Kent. So it's a difficult geography when you're in Medway, because 20 miles one way could be London, but the other way is actually just over the border into Kent.
I googled a 20-mile radius, and it's also like where my grandpa lives in Essex was the outside of it. So
yes, yeah. We suffer with the national problem of sufficiency, and I can only reiterate that we have addressed that in our sufficiency strategy. But that's not what we want for children, and I think you need to know that we're committed, where possible, to bring children back to Medway, but in order to do that, we need the resource.
So that's why that recommendation was going to be in here, but...
Anybody else? Okay, Vice Chair.
So I move that we note the IRA Service Annual Report 22 to 23, and that members will receive redacted copies of the appropriate letters.
Thank you. Item 7, please. We are now... Oh, sorry, second. I've forgotten. Sorry. Second. Who's going to second it? Thank you, Paula. And agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now, item 7. So it's capital budget monitoring. So over to you, Andy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this very brief because it's been a long meeting so far. But this report is the first one to be brought to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and really concentrates on those capital schemes within the remit of the committee. You'll notice within there are tables that relate to the whole capital programme and the funding of the whole capital programme. That's purely just for context for the committee, really. Briefly, we have an underspend projected at round 1, which is based on returns completed, believe it or not, back in June. To give some further context on the report itself, but there's 115,000 underspend. That's quite an unusual thing to be said in finance at the moment. Other things that there are other sections in the report that just give updates on some of the additions, environments that have happened since the original budget was set. And I think that's all I need to say at the moment, but happy to take questions.
Okay, Smither.
I just wanted to note that the conclusion in the report actually says there's an overspend of £115,000, but the tables do clarify what you've said. But yeah,
I'm glad you.
I thought I was missing something, so I'm glad you actually said there was an overspend.
Pointing that out, we'll make sure that's put right. Apologies.
Well spotted. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, I've lost my piece of paper. Is it Anthony? Lenny, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question regarding, obviously you mentioned a lot about school builds here, and I'm part of the Fair Access panel as well. And last month we had to place 75 children. This month we had to place 82 children. In terms of longer term, beyond this, you mentioned certain specific schools, but if it carries on going like that, there's going to be greater urgency on bulge classes, but school extensions. Is there scope in this for that, or is that for maybe future budgets?
Yeah, each year the service brings together a school places strategy where it looks forward, it looks at various demographics that are going on. That's obviously looked at each year and revised by the service. So obviously there's quite a lot of work, as you'll see, going on, and a huge amount of investment going on. And if it's deemed that there is that need, obviously, hopefully we'll get support for that going forward. On top of that, as developments come along, there are Section 106 developer contributions, which also help us to look to the future as well.
Great, thank you.
Adrian, you're next.
Thanks, Joe. I think the gremlins might have crept into table 1 because the top line, children and adults, including public health, approved total costs, total expenditure, remaining budget, I think 74,297,000 minus 30,999 is 43,306,000, not 42,984. But I think there's just a little bit of... So I've got a mind that spots us. It's a little arithmetical error there. Another thing I did notice that was missing was in the condition programme. Are we making any provisions for the RAC issue? I believe one of our schools, Holcombe, has been affected by that. I can't see anything in the capital programme for that, or is it just purely down to the appropriate trust?
With regards to the condition programme that is carried out each year, we obviously a programme of works is set aside by the service, but there is also an element in there where they can respond as well. So they'll be looking at all of these things going forward. With regards to buildings that are academies, we still have an element of work that we will do on those academies, so we still have a responsibility from that point of view.
So it should have been so we've got a little bit of money spare.
I'm led to believe that it appears that we're saying we don't have any RAC in our schools.
Right. Well, perhaps a report about Holcombe wasn't correct then, so that's great. That's great.
I think
that's true.
I think that Holcombe, as it's a trust, it's for the trust to discuss that with the ESFA.
So it is the trust, right? So that's so because it's a trust, right? Yeah, that's good. That's good news for us anyway, isn't it? So, thank you.
Could I bring our young person Oliver in to answer you, Adrian, please?
I believe that Holcombe does have RAC issues. I'm a student there, so I know for a fact that there is RAC issues in our DT block, and there was issues with our sixth form hub. There was issues there as well. But yeah, but the issues are now being rectified, and it should hopefully, fingers crossed, be all sorted by October half term.
Thank you for that useful information. Are you happy with that, Adrian?
Yes, I am. Yes, very happy.
Robbie, I obviously let Oliver in because he had some clarity to the matter. It's your turn now.
Always happy to hear from fellow Holcombe students. I was there when that block got built, so it's not even that old, that one. With the forecast underspend, I know in terms of the overall picture, it's not a colossal amount of underspend, but what happens to this underspend? Will it go to SCND funding, for example? Because obviously 115 grand could buy, 3 or 4 teaching assistants for much needed primary schools, such as the Maldine School in Princess Park Ward.
Robbie?
What I'd like, obviously there's a process by which each scheme is approved normally by council, and it's based on the funding of that scheme. So there could be conditions attached to certain funding which wouldn't allow it to just be switched to somewhere else, but obviously if anything is not used, it would in theory go back into a funding pot, and future reports could bring forward something that members can consider.
Can I just come in on that one? This is capital funding, not revenue funding. Yeah. So it's not for things like teaching assistants, etc.
What a shame. Well, you know, talk to your party leader. Any other questions? Okay, Vice Chair.
I move that we note the results of the first round of capital budgeting monitoring, can't even speak, for 23 to 24, and the management actions to resolve the projected overspend in children and adults. And the changes made to the capital programme are set out in 8.1 and 8.2 to this report. That's
Is that seconded? Okay. Thank you. Agreed.
Sorry, Chair, I think we just read out the recommendations for the revenue monitoring rather than the capital.
Because the capital, there's an underspend.
yeah, I know. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
No, that was right. Thank you, Leah. Okay, we're now on to our next item, which is item 8. Can I just, before we get to that, say to people, please do remember that we are doing a deep dive into the budget in December. So, David.
Ease either way is absolutely fine. Thank you. So, as I said, this is the first round of budget monitoring for 23-24. It was presented to Cabinet on the 8th of August and summarises the revenue budget monitoring position that was considered by the various directorate management teams. The result of that process is a projected overspend of 17.3 million across the council, of which 12.6 million relates to children and adult services. As reported to Cabinet in June, the capital revenue outturn report indicated that we currently have just over £10 million as usable general reserves, so the council would therefore not be in a position to fund an overspend on the scale that's currently projected. Cabinet did agree the recommendation to CMT to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by council, or as a minimum to that within the level that can be funded from the available amount in the general reserves. In previous years, the budget monitoring has only been to be a business and support ONS. This is the first time that it's come through to the various ONS committees, and the report only contains the information that is relevant to this committee, other than at section, I can't remember, I think it's 4 or 5, which has got an overall kind of summary of the council position, just for context. Happy to take questions.
Any questions? Robbie?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask you to explain the financial situation with regards to SEND funding? I know there's forecast overspends and there are some assumptions on underspends. Just a summary of the particular forecasts for the revenue budget for SEND would be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the majority of the overspend in terms of the general fund is in relation to transport, mainstream transport and SEND transport, and the increasing costs that go with that and the numbers of children that we are transporting. The other area in terms of it is DSG, so it's school grant, it's the high needs block, and we are overspent in terms of our in-year, but we're in line with our safety valve plan.
Thank you for that answer. It says the forecast underspend on high needs block of almost £1 million. to be transferred into into reserves, which I guess would be in line with your plan.
That's the ring-fenced reserves, where the ring-fenced account that's got the overspend, the current deficit of our safety valve. So they're not. That's not general fund money.
It says the overspend on early years block of 65,000 and an underspend on high needs block of 940,000 we transferred into the reserve within this division. With regards to an underspend of almost £1 million, what is that underspend precisely on, and how can you ensure that the provision that the council is responsible for is not diminished with an underspend of almost £1 million, or am I sort of reading that wrong?
So the underspend is our safety valve plan. So the detail within our safety valve plan means that in terms of our in-year balance, we need to come in on an underspend to meet our safety valve. And that it goes into the reserve that we have. We have a ring-fenced 3 million in our general fund reserves to as a protection for our safety valve plan. So if we don't meet our plan, we can still meet it in terms of our targets so that we get the additional funding in from the DFE. So it is separate from the general fund balances that you've got there. So when you're asking what we're not doing, why we're saving that money, that's the safety valve work. Remember, we were going a 9 million in-year deficit, and we needed to bring that spend within control. And that's the safety valve plan.
Yes, I think it's important for this committee to watch this very, very closely. I'm on record recently for talking a lot about the changes to SEND budget allocation across Medway. I appreciate that we're on a kind of corrective measure because of national pressures, and I share that concern. But I am very concerned at an underspend of almost £1 million and how that is not going to have a detrimental impact on special needs kids, and is extremely alarming to me, and I think it's something this council should be very, very well aware of. I appreciate you're doing it to meet the DFE's sort of requirements and that kind of stuff, but I warned colleagues on my side as well that when the figures come out, it would be a considerable amount of money that is not being spent that we're used to spending in Medway, and it will have a tangible detrimental impact, and I'm just bringing that to the council's attention. Thank you, Chair.
Can Celia come back, please, Robbie?
Thank you. The safety valve plan and the detail of that we went through in terms of some of the efficiencies that we're making, but I'm happy to meet with you outside of the meeting and go through in detail where we're actually making cuts. And it is largely to do with where we are procuring better value for money, where we're managing our provider market, and those areas which we spoke about in the last ONS. But I'm happy to meet with you and go through that in detail with you.
Okay, Robbie, do you want to come back? You're going to accept that?
Of course, I absolutely accept the offer. Thank you very much. I mean, obviously there are other things as well, like evidence requirements, statements, requirements, things like that, which all adds on the fact that people are then, but with these arguments we've gone through before, right? So, but I'm very happy to take you up on that meeting. Thank you.
Great. We haven't had statements for a decade. They're education healthcare plans now.
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes, it's the sentence after that one that in that last paragraph on page 98 that concerns me. It says this forecast year-end deficit position is 1.136 million higher than submitted as part of the safety valve plan. So it will be necessary to increase the savings delivery in line with the plan. So I get the fact that you have got a plan and you've indicated where some of those savings are coming from, which is good. Could you give us an indication of what will be the consequences if we don't meet that safety valve plan, please?
So if we don't meet the safety valve plan, the DFE don't give us the additional funding. So it's the 17 million revenue and 7 million capital, which will help to pay off our overall deficit and all of the development work which was in the capital report around all those developments, resource provisions, expansions to special schools that we won't be able to do if we don't get that funding coming in. The variance from where we said we would be and where we are now is largely down to an unexpected increase in pupil number and the inward migration into Medway, and we have reported that to the DFE in our response in terms of the safety valve and shown them the change in numbers and reprofiled that accordingly.
No, thanks, Celia. I thought that should be explained because it does have very dire consequences, doesn't it? Thank you.
Thank you for the clarity. George, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's just a simple question from me, Joe. I'm looking at the table on page 96, the table 5.1. I don't see adult social care in the top part where it's aligned with children's and adult social services, regen and culture, business support. There's no HASC in there. Am I reading that right, or?
Yeah, so
It's in the budget requirement underneath, but it's not in the.
Yes. So sorry.
Should that not be in there?
Yeah. So what that table does, so they're directorate total. So the directorate is children and adults. So within that children and adult services, from memory, around £7 million of that overspend is in relation to adult social care, and about £5 or £6 million is in relation to kind of the services that are within the remit of this committee. So the children's services and the education services. If you on HASC, they would have had the detail around the kind of the adult social care budgets at that overview and scrutiny meeting.
That's actually...
And the bottom aspects of it is just how the overall council's budget is funded. So where you've got a line for adult social care, that's a fraction of what we actually spend on adult social care. That's just the specific grants that we get in relation to adult social care.
So the table with all of the departments in there is at the top, you said.
Yeah.
Which is that not 5.1?
Yeah, 5.1 goes across 2 pages, unfortunately, but yeah.
Okay, I don't understand.
So
perhaps you can show me outside the meeting.
Happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and can I just reiterate, we're doing the deep dive in the budget in December. Oh, you might not be at that committee though, George, but that's what's...
No, that's fine.
Leah, please.
So I just, whilst we were talking about send transport, I wondered if we had figures for how much the sort of switching around of services we were using to do some of that with the issues that we had with the Commission in September, how much that had either cost.
I don't at the moment, but we are producing a briefing paper on that.
And that will circulate. Perfect.
Oh, sorry, I've got Smither first and then Lenny.
Mine's just a really brief one, follow on to what Adrian said. I'm glad you actually raised that because I asked in the previous ONS as well about the money from the DFE that's coming towards offsetting the deficit we have. It's a huge thing. That's like critical. And I'd asked specifically about risk management and whether it's reflected in the risk assessment, because even in the report that we had in the last ONS committee, that particular risk wasn't explicitly listed in your risk assessment. I had raised the question, and Celia, you'd assured me there was robust risk management in place. That's great, but I still feel like we should capture that in the risk management that's kind of shown here, because I think that's pretty critical.
I think it is added in the risk report you've got today.
Sorry, can you refer me to the page? I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
So at the bottom of page 101 in the risk table, there is a risk around SEND, right at the bottom one.
Thank you.
No worries, we're friends here. And Lenny, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Firstly, thank you, Celia, for mentioning about the increase in pupil numbers, and it's reassuring in terms of my fair access role to sort of take that back as well, that you're pressurising DfE for support as well, so that's fantastic. I've just got a question, I appreciate we're doing the deep dive in December, just a question regarding the actions that are going to be taken now. Sort of relates to an earlier point about the capital budget being used for TAs potentially as a point where the councillor mentioned, we know that can't happen. But where it says about curtailing, reducing, refinancing the capital programme where it impacts on the revenue budget. Just can we have an example of what that might be, where a capital programme might impact on revenue?
Yeah, certainly. So the vast majority, and Andy will correct me if I'm wrong, the vast majority of our capital programme, or a large part of it, is funded through borrowing. So by doing that review of kind of capital programme and projects, if we're able to kind of delay or kind of stop projects where appropriate, it means we can save revenue costs on the borrowing cost side.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Vice Chair, please.
I move that we note the results of the first round of revenue budget monitoring for 23-24, that Cabinet approved the environment of 500,000 from the independent fostering agency budget to the internal fostering budget to reflect the increased internal fostering rates, and that Cabinet instructed the corporate management team to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full council.
Is that seconded? Thank you, Smither. And agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 9, Council. Council Plan, Performance Monitoring and Risk Summary, Q1.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this. Usually I get colleagues to deal with the reds. We have been doing quite a lot of work on the narrative around these reports so that they are clearer for you. I'm not going to do that this evening. I'd rather just open it up for questions, Chair. I think the narrative is more comprehensive than we usually provide, so I'm hoping that has given members the information they need. Thank you.
Okay, Leah, then Mark, please.
So I had, are we checking on the all children achieving their potential in education? Are we checking on the one school that accounts for 20% of exclusions and just making sure that they're not being a bit heavy-handed? Because it seems a lot from 11 schools.
Yes, so we have a team that work with the schools and discuss options, and we've got a whole range of support around inclusion that we've put in place, a lot starting from this term, and we've reviewed the AP. Obviously, some of those, well, most of those schools are academies, so we don't have as many leavers, but we absolutely are putting in the support around those schools.
I should have included this, it should have played, but it was, the other one was that nearly half of children are leaving primary school without the required standards. I wasn't sure if I misunderstood the stats, so I didn't have a particular question, I just wanted to make sure that I heard.
Yeah, so in terms of our key stage 2, so it's half of them that are not meeting the required standards. And whilst our target is higher than the national, because it was pre-COVID, we've dropped to below pre-COVID levels at the moment. So we would normally compare ourselves with 2019 because that's the benchmark that we've been told to use by DfE, and we are falling below that. And our gap between us and national has widened.
Is there reasons? Do we know why? Like that. That's really broad.
It's incredibly broad. We are bringing the school performance annual report forward, so you'll get it in with provisional data, and then we can do data workshops and have more discussions around that. And obviously we're having discussions around that with our Medway Education Partnership Group as well, because that's a partnership measure that needs to be addressed.
Happy, Leah? Yeah. Okay. Mark, please.
Thank you, Joe. In terms of the Appendix 1, I was just reading the red highlighting on the rate of child protection now being measured by Goldilocks metric. A rate that is too low is as potentially problematic as a rate that is too high. Could you just talk me through that?
So we've seen quite a lot of change in the rates of child protection across the last 4 years, and you'll have seen where it started low. We did a lot of work in the service to try and move through a lot of casework, and we did reduce our numbers of child protection. Roll forward a few years and COVID hit, and coming out of COVID, you will know that there was a national increase of children coming into child protection services. So we weren't an outlier at that time, but we have begun to see, I guess, a consistent increase of children with a child protection plan. That said, there has been a stabilising period over the last 3 to 4 months, and we're beginning to see some of the work that was stuck in courts. There's been an increase of work that hasn't moved through the courts in a timely way, so that's slowed down the throughput of work in children's services, and we're now beginning to see a bit of movement across the whole system. And where you see that movement, you see children entering the care system, and you see children moving through having a child protection plan, coming out the other end, hopefully with a lower level of intervention. But it's a whole mix. So what I can say is that it's levelling off, and that's a good thing. But we are fully aware that we saw a drop and then a hike. So that's really where we're at. But we are content that we're doing everything to move children through the system. The court work has had a significant impact, and I know Kelly and our colleagues in children's social work will only too well talk about the extensive delays across the judiciary that has affected children within that cohort.
Thank you. You okay with that, Mark?
Thank you very much. I mentioned CAMS earlier. Here we have the judiciary and the courts system that we're dependent on. So given that, I'm satisfied with the comprehensive answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Adrian, then Oliver, then Paul.
Thank you, Joe. One thing in Appendix 1 on page 132, I find very disappointing but not unexpected, was the Ofsted findings for Greenacre Academy and Walderslade Girls' Hall. I'm particularly interested in that because a significant number of young people from my ward go to those two schools. Having said that, as far as Walderslade Girls' School is concerned, when they had their problems earlier, I was invited to some meetings at the school, and I'd like to put on record my thanks to the council's youth team, who did a really good job in trying to settle the things. In fact, I was quite taken aback that it was our youth team people, 2 of them, actually were taking the lead in the meetings with the senior staff from the school. So I felt that their input was actually greater than the school staff were putting in, regrettably. So I think that, in some respects, does explain, reflects what Ofsted did. But moving forward from that, I noticed from the explanation underneath that the only thing we can do is have a conversation with the regional director. I do hope that that is going to be a very robust conversation, please, with the regional director, because those two schools, as I say, are the secondary school for a significant number of young people in my area, and I think they deserve better. Just the other thing I'd like to comment is just below that, it is very disturbing, the percentage of children who are persistently absent at the moment, but I think there's a good explanation in the text as the good work that's going on to try and remedy that. So I'm happy with that, but and it's just something I would like to keep a note, but I'd certainly like a reassurance from you that that conversation with the regional director is going to be a really robust one, please.
You have my assurance. We meet with the regional director termly, and those schools are on our agenda almost every meeting at the moment.
Oliver, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Leah brought up the point of, half of the Key Stage 2 pupils are not meeting requirements. I just wanted to know what actions you are taking or you will be taking to kind of solve that issue.
Thank you, and it's a good question. So we work with the schools. We have a number of groups looking at it. I can't give you a specific answer, but we will come back to you with a wider one. Obviously, academies are responsible for their own improvement and their own outcome, and we are largely academised. So our own, what would be a school improvement function is diminished. We're not funded for that anymore. We do have a literacy group, a literacy strategy being drawn up, which will focus on some of this. And you can see that nationally, obviously, the results have dropped as well. We've just dropped at a slightly greater rate than the overall national. But I'm more than happy to come back to you. We do have a meeting focused on performance and outcomes, which is a partnership meeting. So all of that detail and those questions can come through there. Thank you.
Last night as well, Oliver, we had a meeting of chairs and vice chairs of all ONSs, and we've got some things that are going forward from that, and hopefully we're looking at inequalities in education in Medway and mental health, and I think we were all agreed that that was the number 2 priority for Medway currently.
I'd just like to say thank you, but also another question going on what you've responded with. How can we hold these academies to account for not meeting requirements?
So that's not our job, unfortunately, with academies. That's the Department of Education and the Regional Directors Group. We work very closely with them. We actually work in partnership with them and the academies, and we share information and have those conversations. But ultimately, that's not the local authority's job.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. Paula.
Thank you, Jo. So mine's a little bit more broad, big picture. Just looking at the performance measurements. So we've got 7 of the 25 targets being met, 4 are at amber. Very pleased to see that we're improving on the breastfeeding one. That's great. But we've got a significant number that are red. So it's a big question. What are we doing to shift that? Or what can we do to shift that so that we are actually moving more into amber, if not into green, in the coming period?
Thank you, Chair. I think the narrative gives you a flavour of what we're trying to do, both in successes around our green targets, but also those that are red. The children's social care targets, there's a number that are red there, and they are mainly to do with the workforce issue. So, for example, you're not visiting a child within 1 working day. You won't if caseloads are too high or if you haven't got staff to do it. So the broad picture is, with our workforce strategy, with our sufficiency strategy, with all of those strategies coming together to put pressure on improvement, these should shift, and they do shift, although some may go into amber and then go back to green, etc., etc. But all of our strategies, our work plans, etc., have these performance targets in mind. We're absolutely focused on these, and that's the big picture, to be honest.
Paula?
Yeah, I just want to, it's more a comment than a question actually. Just, it's extremely disappointing to see that we've moved from 4th to 12th in terms of the percentage of secondary schools judged as better, good or outstanding. And I understand that as a local authority, given the academisation of education, that we have limited influence in shifting that and, you know, basically encouraging schools to improve. But what practically can we do to influence and to stop the deterioration of, you know, if it continues, we're going from 4th to 12th, what's next, 20th? You know, it's not really serving our children.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So, it's similarly in terms of the question Oliver asked, we don't have a role in that. However, we do categorise our schools, so we use the intelligence data that we have, we use published data, we use attendance data, inclusion data, we use the soft information we have from certain levels of complaints or Ofsted reports coming through. So we categorise our schools and we do offer support based on how much at risk they think we are. And where we have those concerns and where we see schools are not responding, we do pass those on to the regions group, because the school improvement aspect is theirs. We obviously speak with the schools as well, and the majority of schools do have conversations with us, but that is our role in that. So if we have specific information, lots of children being made EHE, hiking exclusions, we share that information with the regions group so they can have that challenge with the schools as well as us having it.
So I'm just assuming frustrating place to be given the academisation of our education sector.
Thank you. I've got Lisa next.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to know whether we have further data on the fact of, out of those that, following from Leah's and Oliver's questions about those that aren't meeting their key stage requirement, 2 requirements, whether they're from the SEND community, as in, do those children actually have SEND, or is it just general? And also whether they're, you know, they have an impact from COVID, where they've lost time and education.
Thank you. So there is a detailed report coming to the January ONS meeting, because we don't have the data published yet, and it will be unvalidated data and the provisional data that comes to the January one, but we thought that was more important that comes to you then, rather than waiting until March when we'll get the final data out, because the difference is not huge. But that will have a breakdown in those vulnerable groups. We don't have that yet until that comes through and we get that data to analyse.
Lisa?
Yeah, it was just to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that forward, because it's something we've lobbied for over time. We appreciate that, Celia. Okay, George.
Thanks, Joe. Firstly, I just want to say thank you, Celia, for I know the work you're doing, particularly on the school front, and thanks to the regional DFE team, who I know. I think, you know, it's been reflected in some of the conversations. These schools, particularly the 2 in here that are inadequate, I think it would be unfair on DFE officials to say that they're not working hard to turn these around, and you know, there is definitely a grasp from the DFE of this, certainly from the conversations I've had with you, but also when I go out in my shadow role and talk to CEOs and others who write to me regularly about various things to do with all of our schools, the work that's going on there. Just on the persistent absence one, because I think this obviously is a massive national issue that I know earlier you were referencing the Children's Commissioner, who's doing a lot of work on this. But just in terms of the council's role in providing that sort of steering work, and it's not always that sort of hard power, but it's the soft power that the council's got, whether it be through the lead member for Children's Services, portfolio holder for education, etc., but also the work of the Director of Children's Services in able to really sort of have that voice with schools about pushing the importance of this. I just wondered about what the conversations we'd had around that metric had been, in the primary heads and in the secondary heads and in the CEOs meetings that I know you hold, and sort of what the reaction is and the view in terms of how we can not only get to the target that we've got, but try to improve above the national average. And I know schools are working and governing bodies are working, steadfastly here in Medway to do that. But I think it's very important that the council uses its influence as a local authority to really set that as a high precedent. We've got good children's services, and it's really important that all of our children and young people are in school 96% of the time. 100% of the time really, but at least at that target, but recognising the national challenges that there have been, particularly since the pandemic. Thank you. Jo.
Thank you. So the local authority does have statutory duties around attendance and persistent absence, and the statutory guidance, new statutory guidance, which we're working to deliver. So that involves us having termly conversations with all schools around their attendance issues and identifying those children that are persistent absence. We are working to make attendance a priority across all of our services. So whichever professional is having that conversation, in whichever arena they are in within the local authority, attendance at school is first and foremost on that. It is worth noting that obviously attendance data in this format is really historic, and you'll see there, in terms of that's the autumn term for last year. The DfE are publishing weekly attendance statistics, and our persistent absence looks better on that. However, that's not a complete data set because that is only schools that return. So we're on about 80% of our schools that feed into that. We are also working with Kent on that a group to look at, particularly at persistent absence, and at the moment we're at the stage of really interrogating the data and trying to understand which cohorts of children are most affected by persistent absence, and kind of range and what those characteristics that might be that cause that persistent absence, so that our action plan that comes out of that alliance is really robust and really targeted on impactful interventions.
That's very good. Thank you, Celia.
Okay, Lenny, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question, it's just a comment. I know lots of people have mentioned about academies and Key Stage 2 outcomes, and I think as a head teacher of a junior school academy, it'd be remiss of me not to make a comment. I just want to say I think Celia and your team do a really good job in terms of trying to support academies, trying to improve outcomes for children, and being on the receiving end of Celia's emails on a regular basis about these meetings. I can assure you they do take place, and that the local authority are focused on improving outcomes for all children, be they in local authority schools or in academies.
Thank you, Lenny. And I'm stopping after, we've got Smither, then Sharon, and that will be it. Thank you.
Sorry, I have two questions. Page 132. No, sorry, apologise. Page 124 first, please. Getting lost in all the pages. Yes, ILAC 7, the percentage of CSE audits graded good or outstanding. Could you just explain what that is? What is that measuring? Is it the audit of the work that social workers are doing? And if so, is that related to what we saw earlier in the Ofsted report of variable social work? Or is that, have I completely misunderstood that?
You've fully understood it.
Okay.
So our audit we have an audit regime that's monthly. We look at up to and sometimes beyond 15 different pieces of work, and that's completed by auditors. And then at the moment we 100% moderate those, and we use the same gradings that Ofsted do to help give us an idea of where practice is. And within the overall audit, there's individual sections that are graded individually so that we have some good evidence around, for example, the quality of assessment, the quality of plans, the quality of direct work, all of the things that we've spoken about this evening. So Leanne was very clear when she came that she wanted us to have an ambitious aspiration for how we audited, and that we wanted to be achieving good to outstanding, which is what we're aiming to do. But you're absolutely spot on. We're not there yet, but we have seen incrementally our requires improvement and good audits increasing over time, and we've been able to demonstrate that through a recent annual report.
Okay, thank you. But to say that we're not there yet, respectfully, is an understatement. 19%
of not being outstanding.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
good or outstanding,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
which means, you know, nearly 80% of it is requires
And no, we're sitting
improvement
very
or
much
lower.
within the requires improvement kind of cusp. I know that just even last month we had an increase of 2 more of good. We only look at a small portion because, again, it was about consistency and quality of auditing. But I think we would concur that we know that that's where we want to get to, but that's what audit is telling us. And Ofsted have told us that we've got that right in terms of our judgments around that.
So it'll be interesting for this committee, I think, to see how this improves.
It will, yeah.
Over the quarters. That was page 124. The next question I have is page 132, which is to do, the percentage of children who are persistently absent from school, which is in red. There was recently a very, very interesting article in the Guardian paper about how this is a national problem and has got quite markedly worse post-pandemic, with a lot of children not school refusing or being, not going in on time and things like that. And apparently there is a real issue around anxiety. More children are suffering from anxiety around going into school. And that was a really interesting article where there were case studies of particular schools in different boroughs, and people were being very innovative. Senior management were trying things. I mean, I think in one school, the head teacher was driving around to persistent, absentees' homes, knocking on their doors in the morning. And I thought, wow, that's quite extreme, and what real commitment. But I think it was highlighting that there is a problem around anxiety, and I think some out-of-the-box thinking is required for that, because just giving parents the information that your child is late, or those letters and everything, which I get sometimes, is just not good. That doesn't seem to be doing it. So I'm just curious, what are we doing that's innovative about this, if there is really an issue around anxiety?
So the Kent and Medway Attendance Alliance is really drilling down into this, and we'll look at evidence of good practice and start to pick up some of this work. What we have done, because you're right, there is an increase in young people not going to school because of school phobia or anxiety, we have commissioned an outreach service that will pick up these young people, go into their homes, work with the families in the homes, and then support those children back into school. Once a child who's out of school with anxiety, that's a health-related issue, once they're out for 15 days, the local authority has a statutory duty to support the education. So we've commissioned a service. It's actually started 5 days ago with outreach workers. They deal with 30 young people at any one time, and they are going into the homes and supporting the child back into school and supporting the school in how they put strategies around him to support that child in school. We've gone for 30. We don't have an exact number of how many are out there. We know we've seen an increase ourselves in the local authority, but we don't know yet what the demand will be like for that. But that has, like I say, just started as part of our package of support for schools.
Okay. You okay with that, Paula? Yeah. Sorry, Paula next. Oops, sorry, I've lost the plot. Sharon.
That's okay, I'll answer to anything. So it's following on nicely actually from Smither. So I was on that point as well, but linking it with Lisa's point, I wondered how many of them figures were also SEN kids, that would they be in them figures as well that were refusing to go to school? Or, I mean, I've had the letters, but you wouldn't have wanted me to take my child into school when they were having a meltdown. So I would be on them figures. And also, I've got dyslexia, so it might be on here somewhere. Are they also included in them figures? Are they SEN kids that are waiting to get a placement in school as well, or will they be on a different?
So, yes, they're really good questions, and that's the piece of data analysis we're doing at the moment, because we don't know our data well enough to answer those questions, and we need to answer those questions to develop the right strategies to have the impact. So linking the send information, i.e. those children that are waiting for places, with our attendance and persistent absence, etc., is really key. We haven't got it yet, but once we've done that piece of work, we will share that. We're happy to share that with you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Robbie, we're out of time, sorry.
Okay, no, it's just following on from that data set. My question was, what quantifies in the data set children suffering with anxiety? Is it like they've been clinically assessed with anxiety, or are these people or even their parents self-reporting? So in your investigative work, are you going to drill down how valid that data is? Because I can imagine, I appreciate there will be kids that are suffering with anxiety disorder, but there's a big difference between anxiety disorders, clinical depression, clinical anxiety, and people self-reporting.
So in terms of the children that our outreach team are going to be supporting, they will be any that we deem to have that anxiety. So that might be the GP has signed them off from school. They don't have to be at that level. In terms of our analysis of the attendance data, we are a little bit restricted by the amount that's out there, so we can see whether they've got an EHCP or if they're on the process of an EHCP. What we are going to have to do is some diagnostic work. So once we've done that, the next step is probably to take a sample of young people and their families and then actually ask them, because we won't know whether there's an anxiety unless they've told us about it in some way. We don't have that recorded to do the drilling down.
You happy with that, Robbie? Sorry. Celia, can I just come back on, you said only 80% of schools report their attendance to you. That's a statutory responsibility. So how are you chasing that up, please?
So it's not to us, it's to the DFE.
Oh.
And it's not statutory, it's optional, because it's a weekly term that comes off their system. So schools can opt into it, but they don't. It's not statutory for schools to do that.
So you know the schools that are opting out of it?
Yes.
Yeah. And have you tried to find out why?
So we have encouraged all of our schools to opt into it. We have seen an uplift, so it was at 80% of our schools going on to it.
Thank you. Over to the Vice Chair.
So unless I missed anything, I don't think there was any recommendations, and I moved that we just note the report.
Is that seconded? Yeah. Thank you, George, and thank you. That's all agreed. Okay, item 10, the work programme. I don't have anything to add to the work programme. I don't know if there is anybody else. Leah?
I need to get this turned back on. So send transport, as I mentioned earlier, I know there's been lots and lots of issues. I just wanted to make sure that it will come before the committee before we start commissioning for next year, or procuring, sorry, for next year.
So we're doing a briefing paper on what has happened this year and lessons learnt, and to kind of try and identify those issues and lessons learnt, and that will be shared with the committee.
Sorry,
Mark.
do we also...
Leah, have you, do you want to come back?
Just quick, so will we also get a chance to look at the process that we use for procurement as a committee before we start the procurement process? Okay. Sorry?
I think the procurement process obviously is for another committee. However, I would support the Vice Chairperson's request that that body of work, that report on what's happened with S&D Transport, comes back to this committee before any decisions by the Cabinet or another body take place with regards to procurement. I think timing is important on that front. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Celia has indicated it would be coming back and it is in the December agenda. Is that okay, Leah?
That's fine. So we will get a chance to kind of look at that before the council make decisions on how that goes, yeah?
Yep. Okay, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, Chair, Joe, sorry. Having committed the people here to a report on adolescent services at the next meeting, I do notice we have a rather heavy agenda next meeting dealing with the revenue and capital programme. Would you, Joe and colleagues, be in agreement to perhaps put it at the January meeting, which would give the officers a bit more time, and it fits quite well with Cook and Wood and the other reports we're getting in the January meeting, I think.
What a great idea. Everyone agree? Yeah. Great. George?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Joe. I was just going to add, obviously, my support to this. I know we had an extensive conversation about the December meeting at the pre-meeting that we had with officers, which is very good. And the other thing I was just going to note was just around the, I think, the importance of members attending data workshops. I know it was referenced by the Leader of Opposition earlier, but I think it's just really positive for all members to do that. Just place that, on record, the importance of that, and the ability that they're providing members before the meetings to have that really in-depth understanding in terms of the subject in question. So we can keep that up, and that will continue to support Scrutiny's function, but support the report. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we totally embrace that. I mean, Liz is the only one I recognise, and we've been on a journey and we know what it was like before data workshops. But also, can I please encourage you, I've done some really fantastic LGA training that it really have been useful. So please look at that, committee members, because, there's some really good ideas. And my next one, Oliver, is about engaging with youth at this committee. Thank you. Thank you all. Please take a homemade cake with you because we need to celebrate our success and our legendary team, and have a lovely evening, rest of them. Social workers rock.